In the wild expanses of Wyoming, Mustang Sierra struggles not only for her own survival, but for the life of her newborn foal Echo, balancing maternal instincts with the harsh laws of nature. Across boundless foothills where wolf packs and mountain lions hunt without mercy, an injured Sierra finds herself at death's door until salvation arrives from unexpected sources. A solitary aging stallion and humans whose intentions remain a mystery. When an invisible thread of fate connects severed family bonds across generations, ancient instincts and unforeseen alliances intertwine in a tale of survival, where true strength is measured not by muscular power, but by the depth of connections that even the cruelest winter cannot destroy. A brief pause before we begin. Write in the comments where you're listening to our stories from. Subscribe to our channel. It's free and you can always change your mind. Enjoy the story. The scent of blood trailed behind Sierra like an invisible flag, marking her path across the Wyoming foothills. She stumbled, her right hind leg buckling beneath her weight, sending sharp spasms of pain coursing through her body. But the wounded Mustang mare did not cry out. To vocalize pain was to announce weakness, and weakness in these hills was an invitation to death. Behind her, pressed close to her heaving flank, her 3-week-old foal Echo trembled. His spindly legs, still awkward and new to the world, struggled to match his mother's halting pace. His dark eyes, wide with confusion and fear, reflected the setting sun that painted the sagebrush crimson, the same shade as the blood seeping from Sierra's ravaged haunch. The wolf attack had come at dawn, just as the herd was moving toward the creek that wound through the valley. Sierra had been at the edge of the group, Echo nursing hungrily, when the alpha female had lunged from behind a rocky outcropping. There had been no warning, only teeth and terror, and the desperate kick that had connected with the wolf's ribs, buying them precious seconds to flee. But the kick had cost her. The wolf's fangs had sunk deep into her muscle before being dislodged, tearing flesh and severing tendons. Now separated from the herd, mother and foal were alone as the sun dipped below the mountains and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Sierra stopped, her nostrils flaring as she tested the wind. The copper tang of her own blood was strong, but beneath it lurked another scent, musky and predatory, fresh, close. She swung her head toward her foal, nudging him urgently with her muzzle. The message was clear even to one so young: be still, be silent. In the gathering shadows behind them, something moved. Something large, something hungry, and it was not alone. Sierra's muscles tensed, her injured leg trembling with the effort of remaining upright. The scent of mountain lion, that distinctive feline musk, grew stronger. A twig snapped to her left and then another to her right. They were being flanked. Echo whinnied softly, his tiny body pressing closer to his mother's warmth. The sound, though quiet, seemed to ricochet through the twilight stillness. Sierra nudged him once more, harder this time, urging him forward toward a stand of junipers ahead. Their only chance was to reach the denser vegetation where the big cats would have less room to maneuver. One step, another. Pain lanced through Sierra's leg with each movement, but the ancient chorus of her ancestors whispered through her blood, "Move or die. Move or your foal dies." A low growl rumbled from the shadowed scrub behind them. Sierra's ears flicked backward, tracking the sound. Instinct screamed at her to run, to gallop, to put distance between her foal and danger. But her body could no longer obey. The best she could manage was a pained trot, placing herself between Echo and the unseen threat. The first mountain lion emerged from the sage, its tawny coat blending with the golden grasses. Female, young but experienced, eyes locked on Echo's vulnerable form. She crouched, tail twitching, calculating distances and weakness. Sierra reared suddenly, her front hooves slashing at the air, her teeth bared in a display that had driven off predators before. The pain in her leg nearly blinded her as she came back down, but she held her ground, snorting a challenge that needed no translation across species. "Not my foal. Not today." The second mountain lion appeared from the opposite direction. Male, larger, circling wide. Working together as they sometimes did when the prey was worth the collaboration, Sierra pivoted awkwardly, trying to keep both predators in her sight, knowing it was impossible. Echo huddled beneath her, sensing his mother's fear, but trusting in her protection as all foals do. The male feinted forward, drawing Sierra's attention and defensive posture. In that instant, the female sprang, not at Echo as Sierra had feared, but at her injured flank. Teeth and claws tore at the already wounded flesh, and Sierra screamed. a sound so primal it momentarily froze all other creatures within hearing. With desperate strength born from maternal fury, Sierra kicked out with her good hind leg, connecting solidly with the female lion's shoulder. The predator yowled, disengaging momentarily, but the damage was done. Fresh blood flowed, and Sierra's vision swam with waves of shock and pain. "Run, Echo. Run now." Whether through their deep bond or pure survival instinct, Echo seemed to understand. He bolted from beneath his mother, his gangly legs finding unexpected coordination in the face of mortal danger. He darted toward the junipers, exactly where Sierra had been guiding them. The male lion shifted, preparing to pursue the easier target, but Sierra summoned her remaining strength and charged, her teeth finding purchase in the cat's haunch. The taste of fur and blood filled her mouth as she clamped down, giving Echo precious seconds to reach the trees. The mountain lion twisted, slashing at Sierra's face with razor claws. One caught her above the eye, opening a cut that immediately welled with blood. Sierra released her grip and staggered back, half blinded, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Through the red haze clouding her vision, she saw Echo reach the edge of the juniper stand. Safety, relative, temporary, but better than the exposed hillside. But the female lion was recovering, shaking off the kick's impact, reorienting toward the fleeing foal. Sierra had one chance, one desperate gambit. She let her injured leg collapse completely, dropping to the ground with a pained whinny that drew both predators' attention. Prey on the ground was irresistible, an easy meal compared to a chase through dense vegetation. Sierra thrashed weakly, presenting the illusion of a mortally wounded animal in its final moments. The lions exchanged glances, a silent communication born from hunts shared. The male approached cautiously, still wary of those dangerous hooves and teeth. The female, slightly limping now from Sierra's kick, circled to approach from behind. Every instinct screamed at Sierra to rise, to flee, to fight. But she forced herself to remain down, to appear vulnerable as Echo disappeared further into the juniper thicket. She could see him there, a small shadow among shadows, watching with those enormous dark eyes that held intelligence beyond his few weeks of life. Stay hidden. Stay quiet. The male lion was close now, his whiskers almost brushing Sierra's neck as he prepared for the killing bite. She could feel his hot breath, smell the carrion scent of previous kills. Her muscles coiled, waiting for the precise moment when both predators committed to the attack. Not yet. Not yet. The female moved in from behind, her focus now entirely on Sierra rather than the vanished foal. As the lions positioned themselves, Sierra closed her eyes, calling upon the ancient wisdom passed through generations of wild horses who had survived these mountains long before humans named them. Now, with explosive force that shocked even herself, Sierra surged upward, twisting as she rose so that her good hind leg caught the female lion squarely in the chest. The impact sent the predator tumbling backward with a surprised snarl. Simultaneously, Sierra's teeth snapped at the male, catching his sensitive nose and drawing blood. The sudden counterattack caught both mountain lions off guard. Sierra did not wait to press her advantage. She knew she had none beyond this moment of surprise. Instead, she lurched toward the junipers, her injured leg dragging, but her three good ones driving her forward with desperate speed. Behind her, the lions recovered quickly, anger now fueling their hunger. They pursued, but Sierra had gained precious yards and reached the edge of the juniper stand, just as their claws swiped at her tail. The dense vegetation closed around her like embrace, branches scratching at her wounds but offering concealment. Sierra pushed deeper, following Echo's scent, her breath coming in painful gasps as branches whipped against her bleeding flank. She found him huddled beneath a low-hanging bough, trembling but unharmed. Sierra nuzzled him quickly, then nudged him forward, deeper into the grove. They couldn't stop, not yet. The mountain lions would follow, more cautiously now, but they would follow. The scent of blood was too strong, the promise of a meal too tempting. As darkness fully claimed the Wyoming wilderness, mother and foal picked their way through the juniper stand, Sierra fighting against the increasing weakness in her limbs, the lightheadedness that threatened to send her crashing to the ground. Each step was torture, each breath a battle, but the ancient imperative drove her forward. Protect the foal. Ensure the bloodline continues. Echo stayed close, somehow understanding the need for silence despite his youth. Occasionally, his small muzzle would press against Sierra's leg, as if offering encouragement, and the simple gesture gave her strength to take another step, and another. Behind them, the frustrated calls of the mountain lions echoed through the night. They were still hunting, still tracking, but at a distance now. Sierra knew this reprieve was temporary. Dawn would bring new challenges, new threats. Her wounds would stiffen overnight, making movement even more difficult. And other predators would detect her blood on the wind. But for this moment, as stars scattered like grain across the vast Wyoming sky, they had survived. Sierra guided Echo to a small depression beneath several ancient junipers, where the accumulated needles formed a soft bed and the overhanging branches created a partial shelter. As Echo collapsed against her, exhaustion claiming his small body, Sierra remained standing despite the agony in her leg. She positioned herself facing the direction from which danger would most likely come, her ears constantly moving, monitoring the night sounds. She would not sleep this night, could not sleep, for in the wild a mother's vigilance was often the only thing standing between life and death. And somewhere in the darkness, drawn by the scent of blood and weakness, predators waited for her to falter. Not tonight, Sierra thought, as the moon rose over the mountains, bathing the landscape in silver light that transformed blood to shadow. Not while my foal still needs me. But as the first fingers of dawn began to stretch across the eastern horizon, Sierra could feel her strength ebbing with each labored breath. The mountain lions had withdrawn for now, but morning would bring fresh hunters. And her trail of blood led straight to where they sheltered. Dawn broke over the Wyoming wilderness, spilling golden light across the landscape. Inside the juniper grove, Sierra stood where she had remained all night, a sentinel, unwavering despite the tremors that occasionally shook her exhausted body. Her wounded leg had stiffened during the cold hours of darkness, the torn flesh now an angry, swollen mass. Dried blood matted her once glossy coat, and the cut above her eye had crusted over, partially obscuring her vision. At her feet, Echo slept curled into a tight ball, his small sides rising and falling with each breath. In sleep, the gangly foal looked even more vulnerable, his spindly legs tucked beneath him, his long eyelashes casting tiny shadows on his cheeks. Sierra lowered her muzzle to nuzzle him gently, drawing in his scent, milk sweet and new, untainted by fear or blood. The touch woke him. Echo blinked up at his mother, then struggled to his feet, shaking juniper needles from his coat. He butted his head against Sierra's flank, seeking breakfast. The simple movement sent pain shooting through her injured leg, and Sierra suppressed a wince. She would need to find water soon, not just for drinking, but to clean her wounds before infection set in. And Echo needed her milk, which would not flow if she became dehydrated. Sierra's keen ears detected movement beyond their hiding place. She froze, nostrils flaring as she tested the air. Not the mountain lions from last night, their scent had faded. This was different. Multiple bodies moving through the sage. The distinctive smell of horses. The herd. Hope flickered in Sierra's chest. If she could rejoin the herd, there would be safety in numbers. The stallion, Thunder, would help protect Echo. But reaching them meant leaving the relative protection of the junipers and crossing open ground. Dangerous with her injury slowing her down. She had to try. Echo needed more protection than she alone could provide in her weakened state. Sierra nudged her foal, guiding him toward the edge of the grove. The movement sent fresh pain through her leg, but she forced herself forward, placing one hoof after another. Each step was an act of will, a battle against the instinct to lie down and surrender to the weakness spreading through her body. At the periphery of the junipers, Sierra paused, scanning the terrain ahead. The herd was visible now, grazing in the valley below. Perhaps 20 horses, led by Thunder, a magnificent black stallion whose vigilance had saved them from predators many times before. Sierra and Echo would need to cross nearly half a mile of exposed terrain to reach them. A flicker of movement to her left caught Sierra's attention. She turned her head sharply, eyes narrowing as she focused on a patch of sage. Something was there, watching, waiting. Not feline. Canine. Wolves. Different from the lone attacker of yesterday. This was a pack, 4, perhaps 5, coordinating with the silent communication that made them such effective hunters. Sierra could see just one, partially hidden in the brush, but she sensed the others, strategically positioned to cut off escape routes. They must have picked up her blood trail during the night, following it to the juniper grove. Now they were laying siege, patient and methodical. Unlike the mountain lions who had given up when the chase became difficult, wolves would wait, conserving energy, knowing that the wounded prey would eventually have to emerge. Sierra's mind raced. The herd was her best chance, but reaching them meant crossing open ground where the wolves would have the advantage of speed. Staying in the grove meant a war of attrition she would inevitably lose as thirst and hunger weakened her further. Echo whinnied softly, sensing his mother's tension. The sound carried in the still morning air, and Sierra saw the visible wolf's ears prick up, its head turning precisely toward their location. Their position was compromised. Sierra made her decision. With a gentle but insistent nudge, she guided Echo deeper into the grove, away from the watching wolf. They would skirt the edge of the junipers, using the cover of vegetation for as long as possible before making a dash for the herd. It would mean a longer journey but a safer one, if her strength held out. Moving as quietly as possible, Sierra led Echo through the juniper stand. Her nostrils constantly tested the air, tracking the wolves' positions by their scent. They were moving too, paralleling her path outside the grove, anticipating her strategy. Sierra changed direction twice, doubling back before continuing, trying to confuse their expectation. The eastern edge of the grove came into view, and with it, a new problem. Between them and the valley where the herd grazed lay a stretch of rocky terrain with minimal cover, an area locals called the Broken Lands. It would be treacherous footing for a healthy horse, let alone one with a severe leg injury. But it offered the shortest path to the herd, and the wolves would be equally hindered by the difficult terrain. Sierra paused at the edge of the junipers, gathering her strength. Echo pressed against her side, his small body warm and trusting. She had brought him into this world during a spring storm, had watched him take his first wobbly steps, had guided him through his first gallop across the valley floor. Every maternal instinct demanded she see him reach adulthood, see him run with the power and grace that was his birthright. She would not fail him now. With a deep breath that sent pain through her chest, her ribs bruised from yesterday's desperate battle, Sierra stepped out from the cover of the junipers and into the open. Echo followed, staying close to her side. They moved at a pace that balanced speed against Sierra's injury. Faster than a walk, but not the full gallop her instincts screamed for. They had covered perhaps 50 yards when the first wolf appeared, emerging from the sage to their right. It made no move to attack, merely pacing them, yellow eyes fixed on Sierra's bloody flank. A second wolf materialized on their left, and then a third behind them. The pack was revealing itself now, confident in their advantage. Sierra maintained her pace, her focus locked on the broken lands ahead. If they could reach the rocky terrain, the wolves would need to commit to an attack or risk losing their prey in the labyrinth of stone. She wasn't sure she had the strength to fight them off, but she would die trying before she let them take Echo. The wolves were closing the distance gradually, their coordinated movements betraying a strategy tested over countless hunts. The largest, the alpha male, was positioning himself to cut off Sierra's path to the broken lands, while two others moved to separate mother and foal. Sierra saw the trap forming and acted with decisive speed that shocked her own pain-addled body. She swerved abruptly directly toward the alpha male, her teeth bared in challenge. The unexpected aggression caused the wolf to hesitate momentarily, and in that split second, Sierra charged past him, Echo matching her sudden acceleration. The alpha recovered quickly, snapping at Sierra's injured leg as she passed, but his teeth closed on air. Sierra pushed forward, her breathing ragged, spots dancing at the edges of her vision from the exertion. They were almost to the rocks now. Just a few more strides. They plunged into the broken lands, the flat ground giving way to a jumble of boulders and crevices. Sierra picked her path carefully, each step deliberate despite the urgency of their situation. Behind them, the wolves paused at the edge of the rocky terrain, their advantage of speed neutralized by the difficult footing. For several tense minutes, Sierra navigated the maze of stone, Echo following in her exact footsteps. The wolves paced the perimeter, occasionally testing the rocks before retreating. They hadn't given up. They were too hungry for that, but they were recalculating, looking for a weakness to exploit. Sierra's injured leg caught on a jagged stone, sending a new wave of pain through her body. She staggered, nearly losing her balance, and Echo nickered anxiously at her side. Sierra steadied herself, forcing her breathing to slow. They needed to keep moving. The herd was visible in the distance now, still grazing peacefully, unaware of the drama unfolding in the broken lands. A shadow passed overhead, large, winged, deliberate. Sierra glanced up to see a golden eagle circling above them. The great bird was watching the unfolding chase with interest, perhaps hoping for scavenging opportunities if the wolves succeeded. In the wilderness, no tragedy went unexploited. One creature's death was another's survival. The thought hardened Sierra's resolve. She was not yet ready to become another link in the food chain. With careful determination, she continued through the rocky terrain, each step bringing them closer to the safety of the herd. The wolves had split up now, two continuing to follow Sierra and Echo, while the others circled around, intending to cut them off where the broken lands met the valley floor. It was a smart strategy, one that Sierra had seen them employ before against injured elk and deer. But she had an advantage the wolves couldn't anticipate. She knew exactly where she was going. This was her territory, her home range for 3 seasons. She had explored every inch of the broken lands during better days, out of the curious nature that made her both adventurous and cautious. Sierra changed course, heading not for the obvious exit from the rocky terrain, where the wolves would be waiting, but for a more obscured path that wound between 2 massive boulders. It was a tight squeeze, especially for an adult horse, but it offered a path the wolves might not know about. Echo followed trustingly as Sierra led him into the narrow passage. The walls of stone rose on either side, so close that Sierra's injured haunch occasionally brushed against the rough surface, sending fresh pain through her body. But she pressed on, the passage gradually widening until it opened onto a small hidden meadow, barely an acre in size, nestled within the broken lands. Sierra paused, her sides heaving with exertion. The meadow offered a moment's respite. There was even a small seep of water emerging from between rocks, created by underground springs. Sierra drank gratefully, the cool liquid easing her parched throat. Echo did the same, then turned to his mother to nurse. The momentary peace was shattered by a howl, close, too close. One of the wolves had found the hidden passage. Sierra nudged Echo away from her milk-heavy udder. There was no time to rest. The meadow had only one other exit, a steep, rocky slope that led directly to the valley floor. In her prime, Sierra could have navigated it easily, but with her injury, it would be treacherous. Still, it was their only option. As the sound of the wolf's approach echoed through the narrow passage behind them, Sierra guided Echo to the slope. She would go first, testing each step before her foal followed. The descent was nerve-wracking. Loose stones shifted under her hooves, threatening to send her tumbling down the incline. Every few steps, she paused to ensure Echo was managing the difficult terrain. They were halfway down when Sierra's injured leg gave out completely. The limb buckled and she crashed to her knees, sliding several yards before managing to stop herself. Echo whinnied in alarm, freezing in place above her. Sierra struggled to rise, panic giving her strength as she heard the wolves emerging into the meadow above. After 2 failed attempts, she regained her footing, though she now favored her injured leg even more severely. She nickered softly to Echo, encouraging him to continue. The rest of the descent was pure determination over pain. Sierra focused on each step, each breath, pushing away the weakness that threatened to consume her. Echo stayed close, his presence both a comfort and a desperate responsibility. Finally, they reached level ground. The valley floor stretched before them, and the herd was clearly visible now, perhaps a quarter-mile away. So close, yet still so far given Sierra's condition. Behind them, the wolves had begun their descent of the rocky slope, more carefully than Sierra and Echo had, but with the inevitable patience of experienced hunters. They knew their prey was weakening. They could afford to be cautious. Sierra set off toward the herd, pushing herself into a trot despite the agony in her leg. Every stride was a battle against her body's growing weakness, but the sight of the herd, of safety, pulled her forward. Echo kept pace, occasionally looking back at the pursuing wolves with wide, frightened eyes. The lead wolf, the alpha, had reached the valley floor and was accelerating. The others were close behind, spreading out in the hunting formation that had brought down countless prey animals over the eons. Sierra could hear their paws on the earth, could almost feel their breath on her tail. In desperation, she threw back her head and released a loud, piercing whinny, a call for help that echoed across the valley. In the distance, she saw Thunder's head snap up, his ears pricked toward the sound. The black stallion stared in their direction, then let out an answering trumpet that lifted Sierra's failing spirits. Thunder was coming. He had seen them, but would he reach them in time? The alpha wolf lunged, his teeth closing on Sierra's already injured leg. Fresh pain exploded through her body as she kicked out, catching the wolf in the shoulder. The impact disrupted his bite, but not before those razor teeth had deepened her wound. Sierra staggered but remained upright, placing herself between Echo and the attacking wolves. The pack circled now, darting in to nip at her flanks before retreating from her defensive kicks. Each attack weakened her further, blood flowing freely from multiple wounds. Echo, panicked, began to bolt, not toward the approaching herd but back toward the broken lands. Sierra's heart nearly stopped as she saw him running directly toward 2 of the wolves. With strength born of maternal terror, Sierra charged the wolves, threatening her foal. Her larger size sent them scattering momentarily, giving her precious seconds to redirect Echo with a sharp nicker. The foal, responding to his mother's command, changed course, now galloping toward the oncoming thunder. But the effort had cost Sierra dearly. As she turned to follow Echo, her injured leg finally gave out completely. She collapsed to the ground, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Desperately, she tried to rise, but her body refused to obey. The wolves closed in, sensing their moment of victory. Sierra's vision blurred, fatigue and blood loss taking their toll. Through the haze, she saw Echo running toward the herd, saw thunder covering the distance between them with powerful strides. Her foal would make it. He would be safe. As the alpha wolf approached her fallen form, teeth bared for the killing strike, Sierra felt an unexpected calm settle over her. She had done her duty as a mother. Echo would live. The bloodline would continue. In the distance, Thunder's hooves thundered across the valley floor. But Sierra knew he would be too late for her. The alpha wolf tensed, preparing to lunge at her exposed throat. A shadow fell across them both, massive, unexpected. The alpha wolf looked up, startled, just as 1,500 pounds of fury crashed into him from the side. It wasn't Thunder. The massive buckskin stallion who had slammed into the alpha wolf was Dust, an aging bachelor who had been driven from the herd by Thunder years ago. His coat, once golden as the Wyoming sun, had faded with age, but his muscular frame retained the power that had made him herd stallion before Thunder's challenge. The alpha wolf went flying, a yelp of surprise and pain escaping its throat as it tumbled across the grass. The other wolves hesitated, their coordinated attack disrupted by this unexpected development. Sierra, still struggling to rise, stared in shock at her unlikely savior. Dust reared, massive hooves slashing at the air before crashing down dangerously close to a second wolf's head. His teeth were bared in a ferocious display, ears pinned flat against his skull. The message was clear: back away from her. The wolves regrouped quickly, circling now with greater caution, their hungry eyes assessing this new threat. The alpha limped slightly as he rejoined the pack, but his focus remained intense, calculating. One horse, even a large stallion, could still be overwhelmed by their coordinated tactics. Sierra used the momentary reprieve to try again to stand. Her injured leg trembled violently, refusing to bear weight, but with supreme effort she managed to rise on her three good legs. Blood dripped steadily from her wounds, but she stood tall beside Dust, presenting a united front against the predators. In the distance, Thunder was closing in, Echo running beside him now. The herd had followed their leader, spreading out in a defensive formation that Sierra recognized, a strategy they employed when predators threatened one of their own. Help was coming, but the question remained: would it arrive in time? The alpha wolf made his decision. With a barely perceptible signal, a flick of his tail perhaps, or a subtle change in his posture, the pack attacked as one. Two wolves lunged for Dust, targeting his front legs in an attempt to bring him down. The alpha and another wolf converged on Sierra, sensing she was the weaker target. Dust moved with surprising agility for his age, pivoting to kick out with his hind legs at one attacker, while simultaneously striking with his front hooves at the other. His aim was true. A hoof caught one wolf squarely in the chest with a sickening crack of breaking ribs. The animal yelped and retreated, its hunting days possibly ended by that single powerful blow. Sierra had no such luck. The alpha wolf dodged her weak defensive kick and clamped his jaws on her good hind leg, teeth sinking deep into the flesh. Sierra screamed, a sound of pain and fury that seemed to carry across the entire valley. She twisted, trying to dislodge the predator, but each movement only drove those sharp teeth deeper. The second wolf darted in, aiming for her throat, but Sierra saw the attack coming. With desperate speed, she lowered her head and met the charge with her own teeth, catching the wolf's sensitive ear. She bit down with all her remaining strength, tasting blood as the cartilage tore. The wolf howled, thrashing to free itself. Sierra maintained her grip for precious seconds before releasing, then immediately struck with her forehead against the wolf's skull, dazing it temporarily. But the alpha still had her leg, and Sierra could feel her strength ebbing with each heartbeat. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. She was vaguely aware of Dust fighting nearby, of the thunder of approaching hooves, but her world had narrowed to the immediate battle for survival. With one final surge of desperate energy, Sierra twisted and fell deliberately toward the alpha wolf. The unexpected move, essentially collapsing on top of her attacker, caught the predator off guard. Nearly 1,000 pounds of horse crashed down, partially trapping the wolf beneath her. The impact jarred the alpha's grip loose, and Sierra rolled away, leaving the wolf scrambling to extricate itself from beneath her weight. She struggled to rise once more, knowing that to remain down was to die, but her body had reached its limit. Her legs wouldn't respond. Through dimming vision, Sierra saw Thunder arrive at last, the black stallion rearing magnificently as he charged into the fray. The remaining wolves scattered before this new threat, regrouping at a safer distance. Sierra's head lowered to the grass, her breathing labored. She had fought with everything she had. Echo was safe now. That was all that mattered. As consciousness began to slip away, Sierra felt a gentle nudge against her cheek. She forced her eyes open to see Echo's concerned face inches from her own. Behind him stood Thunder, vigilant and protective, while Dust positioned himself on her other side, both stallions creating a living barricade against the still-watching wolves. Other horses from the herd formed a protective circle around them, some facing outward to watch for danger, others moving closer to investigate Sierra's condition. Among them was Willow, an older mare, whose gentle wisdom had guided Sierra since she was a foal herself. Willow approached, her soft muzzle examining Sierra's wounds with careful attention. The world faded to gray, then black, as Sierra surrendered to exhaustion and blood loss. Sierra drifted in and out of consciousness through the day, vaguely aware of the herd's presence around her. Sometimes she felt Echo's small body pressed against hers. Other times she sensed Thunder standing guard nearby, his familiar scent reassuring even in her semi-conscious state. Dust had remained as well, taking up position on her opposite side from Thunder, the two stallions maintaining an uneasy truce in the face of a greater concern. When she finally woke fully, twilight was painting the valley in shades of purple and gold. The air had cooled, carrying the scent of sage and coming rain. Sierra lifted her head, surprised to find strength enough for even that small movement. Echo lay curled against her side, sleeping soundly. Thunder grazed nearby, while Dust stood alert at the periphery of the small group. The main herd had moved a short distance away to better grazing, but remained within sight. Sierra assessed her condition with the pragmatic clarity of a wild creature. Her wounds had stopped bleeding, though dried blood matted her coat in several places. Both hind legs were damaged now, the original injury from the wolf attack yesterday and the fresh wound from today's battle. She would be lucky to walk, let alone run. And in the wilderness, an animal that could not run was an animal marked for death. As if sensing her thoughts, Willow approached, the gray mare moving with the deliberate gait of advanced age. She lowered her head to touch noses with Sierra in silent greeting, then began to groom her neck with gentle teeth, a gesture of comfort and affiliation that went deeper than mere sociability. It was an affirmation. You are heard. You are family. We stay together. Sierra accepted the grooming, drawing comfort from the simple contact. But practical concerns pressed upon her. She needed water desperately, and her body cried out for food to replace the energy lost to blood and trauma. The nearest water was the creek that ran through the valley's center, impossibly far in her current condition. As if reading her thoughts, Willow nudged her once more, then moved away toward the main herd. Sierra watched as the old mare approached several others, making contact with each. Some form of silent communication passed between them, and then a small group began to move in Sierra's direction, led by Willow. Among them was Dawn, a dappled mare only 2 years Sierra's senior, who had lost her own foal to mountain lions early in the spring. Since that tragedy, Dawn had kept to the periphery of the herd, her grief a palpable thing even to those who could not name it as such. But now she moved with purpose, following Willow back to where Sierra lay. Thunder watched the approaching mares with alert interest but made no move to interfere. Dust, however, shifted nervously, unsure of his place in this social dynamic after so long away from the herd. In the complex hierarchy of Mustang society, an injured horse created unpredictable currents. Willow and Dawn reached Sierra first, the others hanging back slightly. Dawn approached Echo, who had awakened at their arrival, and began to groom the foal with gentle attention. There was something tender and broken in her eyes as she touched the young horse she had not birthed. Sierra understood immediately what was happening. It was rare but not unprecedented in their herd's history. A mare who had lost her foals sometimes formed a bond with an orphaned or vulnerable foal from another mare. Dawn was offering herself as a surrogate protector for Echo, while Sierra recovered, if she recovered at all. The thought brought a complex wave of emotion through Sierra's exhausted body. Her instinct was to reject the offer, to insist that Echo needed only her. But the practical wisdom that had kept her alive for 7 harsh Wyoming winters whispered a different truth. Echo's survival might depend on accepting help. As if sensing her mother's internal conflict, Echo looked back at Sierra, his dark eyes questioning. He had not moved away from Dawn's gentle grooming, but neither had he fully accepted it. He was waiting for his mother's guidance. Sierra nickered softly, giving him permission. Echo hesitated a moment longer, then turned back to Dawn, allowing the grieving mare to continue her attentions. Dawn's eyes closed briefly, a visible tremor running through her body at this small acceptance. Meanwhile, Willow had been joined by two younger mares, River and Sage. Together, they began to graze in a steadily expanding circle around Sierra, systematically stripping the area of its best grasses and depositing them in a pile within Sierra's reach. It was behavior Sierra had witnessed before when another mare had been injured during a mountain lion attack several seasons ago. The herd was bringing sustenance to her since she could not reach it herself. Sierra stretched her neck toward the gathered grass, hunger overcoming pride. She ate slowly, each bite requiring conscious effort. But the simple act of eating brought a measure of strength back to her depleted body. Thunder approached as the mares worked, his powerful presence causing a subtle shift in their positions, but no retreat. He lowered his head to Sierra's, their foreheads touching in a gesture that transcended simple herd dynamics. There was history between them, seasons of running side by side, of mutual protection, of shared survival against the brutal Wyoming elements. Though not Echo's sire, Thunder had accepted the foal as part of his herd without hesitation. Now, his dark eyes studied Sierra with an intelligence that belied human assumptions about equine awareness. He seemed to be assessing her condition, calculating her chances, measuring the threat her injuries posed to the herd's overall safety. A wounded horse attracted predators, and Thunder's primary responsibility was to the entire group. Whatever his internal deliberations, Thunder made no move to drive Sierra away. Instead, he positioned himself strategically nearby, occasionally scanning the surrounding terrain for threats. The wolves had retreated but would not have gone far. The scent of blood and weakness would draw them back, along with other predators. Dust remained at a respectful distance, his position relative to the herd uncertain. He had been solitary for so long that reintegration seemed unlikely, yet he had risked his life to save Sierra and Echo, a choice that defied simple explanation. Now he watched the interactions with alert wariness, ready to defend against threats but unwilling or unable to rejoin the social structure he had once led. As twilight deepened into true darkness, a light rain began to fall. The drops were cool on Sierra's fevered body, washing away some of the dried blood and bringing blessed relief to her inflamed wounds. She drank the moisture from the grass, her thirst still dire despite the food the herd had provided. Echo had settled beside Dawn, the older mare's body sheltering him from the rain. Sierra watched them, fighting the instinctive jealousy that flared at seeing another mare so close to her foal. But practicality won out. Echo needed protection she could not currently provide. Dawn needed a purpose beyond her grief. It was an arrangement born of necessity, but not without its own form of grace. As night fully claimed the valley, the herd gradually settled around Sierra in a protective formation that had evolved over thousands of years of collective wisdom. The strongest adults positioned themselves on the perimeter, while the young and vulnerable remained in the center. Sierra found herself in that protected core, a position she had not occupied since her own days as a foal. Despite her best efforts to remain vigilant, exhaustion eventually claimed her. She drifted into uneasy sleep, her dreams filled with running wolves and the sensation of falling. Dawn came with a subtle shift in the light and a change in the air. Sierra woke to find the herd already grazing around her, their presence constant despite the night's passage. Echo nursed from Dawn nearby, the surrogate mare standing patiently as the foal took nourishment her body had continued to produce despite her own loss. Sierra shifted, attempting to rise. The pain in her hind legs had settled into a deep, throbbing ache, but the sharp agony of yesterday had somewhat abated. With tremendous effort, she managed to get her front legs under her. Then, after 2 failed attempts, her hind legs as well. She stood trembling, her injured legs barely supporting her weight. The simple act of rising had depleted much of her limited energy, but standing was a victory nonetheless. Around her, the herd took notice. Willow approached, nickering softly in what seemed like approval. Thunder, who had been grazing some distance away, lifted his head at Sierra's movement. He watched her intently, as if gauging her recovery. Dust, who had remained through the night at the herd's periphery, also turned to observe her progress. Echo abandoned his breakfast and trotted to his mother, nuzzling her neck with obvious joy at seeing her upright. Sierra returned the greeting, drawing comfort from her foal's presence. But she noted how quickly he returned to Dawn afterward. A small betrayal that Sierra's rational mind understood, but her heart protested. Sierra took a tentative step forward. Her injured legs held, though they trembled with the effort. Another step, and another. Each movement was a study in determination over pain, will over physical limitation. But moving even awkwardly meant hope. A stationary horse in the wild was a dead horse. The morning air carried new scents. Water from the nearby creek, the sweet grass of the valley floor, and more distantly, the musky odor of elk moving through the highlands to the west. But beneath these familiar smells lurked others, less welcome. The feral stench of coyotes, the distant but unmistakable scent of a mountain lion, and, most concerningly, the smell of wolves. The pack had not abandoned their pursuit. They had merely retreated to regroup, to wait for a more opportune moment. Sierra knew their patience was as boundless as their hunger. Thunder sensed the danger as well. He moved through the herd with purpose, communicating through small gestures and subtle vocalizations that it was time to move. The creek beckoned, not just for water, but for the better visibility its open banks provided against predator approaches. Sierra faced a crucial decision. Attempting to move with the herd would tax her limited strength, perhaps to the breaking point. But remaining behind alone meant certain death. She looked at Echo, now standing alert beside Dawn as the herd began to organize for movement. Her foal would go with the herd, with or without her. With that knowledge burning in her heart, Sierra forced herself into motion. Each step was agony. Each yard covered a triumph of maternal devotion over physical limitation. She moved at a fraction of her normal pace, but she moved. The herd remarkably adjusted. Under Thunder's guidance, they slowed their typical progress, maintaining a cohesive group that kept Sierra and Echo at its protected center. It was an accommodation that defied simple instinct. Predator avoidance typically demanded speed, yet demonstrated the complex social bonds that had allowed Mustangs to survive for centuries in this unforgiving landscape. Dust had disappeared during the night, and Sierra found herself oddly affected by his absence. The aging stallion had saved her life, had fought alongside her against overwhelming odds, yet had vanished without acknowledgement. It was the way of solitary bachelors, perhaps, but something about his departure left an unexpected hollow in Sierra's awareness. Their progress toward the creek was slow but steady. Sierra focused on each step, pushing away the pain that threatened to overwhelm her consciousness. Echo stayed close, dividing his attention between his mother and Dawn, the grief-stricken mare who had become his temporary guardian. They had covered perhaps half the distance to the water when Thunder suddenly froze, his head high, nostrils flaring as he tested the wind. The herd responded instantly to their leader's alarm, drawing closer together in defensive formation. Sierra smelled it a moment later, wolf, not from behind them where they had last encountered the pack, but from ahead near the creek. The wolves had anticipated the herd's movement and positioned themselves accordingly. Thunder trumpeted a warning that echoed across the valley, a sound of defiance and protection that Sierra had heard him use only in moments of dire threat. The stallion pawed the ground, his powerful body tensed for battle. From the tall grass near the creek, shadowy forms emerged. The wolf pack, led by their limping alpha, strategically positioned to intercept the herd's progress. They had used the night to circle around, cutting off access to the water the horses desperately needed. Sierra's heart sank. The herd was strong, but the wolves were cunning and patient. They would wait, harassing the group, targeting the weakest members, herself and Echo. Eventually, thirst would force the horses to attempt reaching the creek, and in that moment of vulnerability, the wolves would strike. The standoff stretched into long minutes of tense observation from both sides. The wolves made no immediate move to attack, conserving their energy. Thunder kept the herd tightly grouped, occasionally making short charging feints to maintain a buffer of space between predator and prey. Sierra, meanwhile, felt her strength waning. Standing had been achievement enough. This prolonged tension was rapidly depleting her reserves. She widened her stance to better balance her weakening body, determined not to show vulnerability that might trigger the wolf's attack instinct. Echo pressed against her side, his small body trembling with fear and confusion. Dawn positioned herself protectively on his other flank, her maternal instincts fully awakened, despite her unrelated status. The impasse could not last. Something had to give. Either the wolves would attack, or the herd would be forced to retreat from the needed water. As if sensing the critical moment approaching, Thunder looked back at the herd, his gaze falling specifically on Sierra. There was question in that look, and something more. A weighing of options that transcended simple animal reaction. Sierra understood with sudden clarity. Her presence was endangering the entire herd. Thunder was calculating whether the group's survival might require abandoning its wounded member. It was not cruelty but practicality, the brutal equation of wilderness existence. Before any decision could be made, a new sound echoed across the valley. The powerful trumpeting of a stallion, but not Thunder's call. All heads turned toward the source, including those of the watchful wolves. Dust appeared on the ridge above the creek, his aging but powerful body silhouetted against the morning sky. He was not alone. Behind him came a small band of bachelor stallions, perhaps a dozen in all, former herd leaders or young males who had been driven from family groups to form their own loose association. The bachelor band thundered down the ridge toward the creek, directly toward the positioned wolves. It was not a coordinated attack. Bachelor stallions were not known for sophisticated cooperation, but rather a simultaneous movement toward water that happened to intersect with the predator's location. The wolves scattered before this unexpected cavalry, not abandoning their strategy entirely but forced to reposition. The alpha's frustrated howl carried across the valley as his carefully laid trap was disrupted. Dust led the bachelors straight through the wolves' former position to the creek's edge. There, the stallions drank with the casual confidence of their collective strength, effectively securing the water source. Thunder seized the opportunity, leading the herd forward while the wolves were disorganized. Sierra forced her battered body into motion once more, drawing on reserves she didn't know she possessed. Echo and Dawn stayed close beside her as the group moved toward the life-giving water. As they approached the creek, Dust separated from the bachelor band and moved to intercept them. For a tense moment, it seemed a confrontation between the two stallions might be inevitable. Thunder defending his herd rights, Dust potentially challenging for leadership once more. Instead, something remarkable occurred. Dust dipped his head as Thunder approached, a gesture of submission from one who had once been dominant. It was not fear, but something more nuanced. A recognition, perhaps, that Thunder's leadership had kept the herd safe through dangers that might have decimated them under different guidance. Thunder accepted the gesture with a slight nod, then surprisingly stepped aside, creating a path for Dust to approach Sierra. The old stallion moved forward cautiously, stopping before her with a gentleness that belied his powerful frame. Sierra met his gaze, seeing in his eyes a history she had almost forgotten. Dust had been herd stallion when she was born, had watched over her first wobbly steps much as she now watched over Echo's. Before Thunder's challenge had driven him to solitary existence, he had been protector to generations of foals now grown to adulthood, including her own. Understanding Dawn with the force of lightning, Dust had not intervened randomly in her desperate battle with the wolves. He had come specifically for her, for the foal he had once protected, now grown to motherhood herself. The recognition of her, perhaps by scent or movement pattern, had drawn him from his solitary existence to risk everything in her defense. And now he had brought reinforcements, ensuring access to the water both horses desperately needed. Echo approached the old stallion cautiously, his natural curiosity overcoming his fear. Dust lowered his great head to the foal's level, nostrils flaring as he drew in the young one's scent. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement across generations, a connection that transcended simple herd dynamics. The wolves watched from a distance, their strategy disrupted, but their hunger undiminished. They would regroup, would find another opportunity. The presence of the bachelor band had tilted the odds temporarily, but the fundamental equation remained. Sierra's wounds made her, and by extension Echo, vulnerable targets. As she finally reached the creek and drank deeply of its cool water, Sierra contemplated the difficult truth of her situation. Her recovery, if it came at all, would be slow. Too slow, perhaps, for the dangerous world they inhabited. The herd could not remain in defensive formation indefinitely, and the bachelor band would eventually disperse to their solitary routines. What then? What hope remained for a wounded mare and her vulnerable foal in a wilderness that forgave no weakness? As if in answer to her unspoken question, a distant rumble sounded from the western ridgeline. All eyes turned toward the sound, horses and wolves alike, predator and prey momentarily united in wary observation. Beyond the ridge came something no wild Mustang could have anticipated, something that would change everything about their precarious existence. The sound of human voices carried on the wind. The effect was immediate and electric. Thunder's head snapped up, water still dripping from his muzzle, his ears pivoting toward the sound. A tremor ran through the assembled horses. A collective memory of danger passed through bloodlines that had known both the kindness and cruelty of the two-legged creatures. Sierra felt the fear ripple through her own body, an instinctive response that transcended personal experience. Though she had never been captured or directly handled by humans, she carried the ancestral wariness of all wild Mustangs. Stories told in scent and movement and behavior had taught each generation to be cautious of the beings who built fences across the open range. The wolves, too, reacted to the human presence. The alpha raised his head, ears alert, calculating this new variable in the complex equation of predator and prey. After a moment's hesitation, he signaled retreat with a subtle movement. The pack melted into the tall grass, not abandoning their hunt entirely, but withdrawing to reassess from a safer distance. Echo pressed closer to Sierra's side, sensing the sudden tension in the herd. Dawn positioned herself protectively on his other flank, while Willow and the other mares moved into a looser formation, ready to flee but not yet in panic. Dust and Thunder exchanged a glance that seemed to contain volumes of shared understanding. The old stallion moved toward the bachelor band, communicating through subtle body language. The bachelors, already on edge from the wolves, needed little encouragement to move away from the perceived human threat. But Thunder made no immediate move to lead the herd to safety. Instead, he stood his ground, assessing. Sierra recognized his dilemma. Flight was their primary defense against humans, but rapid movement would leave her and Echo vulnerable, unable to keep pace. The bond of herd protection warred against the instinct for immediate escape. The voices grew clearer, accompanied now by the distinctive sound of human transportation. Not the mechanical roar of their metal vehicles, but the rhythmic hoofbeats of domesticated horses. Sierra's nostrils flared as she caught the scent. Horses, yes, but different somehow. Their odor carried traces of unnatural substances, of confined spaces, of diets not foraged from open range. Cresting the western ridge came 4 humans on horseback, moving at a deliberate pace down the rocky slope. They wore the distinctive attire Sierra had learned to associate with the 2-legged creatures who occasionally monitored the Mustang herds. Wide-brimmed coverings on their heads, layers of body coverings in earth tones, and the tools that extended their reach and power. Thunder snorted, pawing the ground in warning. The oldest mare in the herd, Star, who had experienced human interaction during a drought season years past, moved nervously. Her anxiety transmitted to the younger horses, creating a ripple of restless movement. Sierra forced herself to stand firm despite her injuries, maternal instinct overriding pain as she positioned herself to shield Echo from direct view. Dawn mirrored her protective stance, the 2 mares creating a living barrier around the vulnerable foal. The humans approached the creek at an angle, maintaining distance from the wild herd while clearly observing them. They spoke to each other in their incomprehensible language, occasionally pointing toward the Mustangs. One raised a small object to its face. What Sierra couldn't know was a pair of binoculars, allowing detailed observation from afar. Thunder maintained his position between the humans and his herd, a living embodiment of vigilant protection. He allowed the strangers to approach only to a certain distance before issuing a warning snort in half rear that clearly communicated his boundary. The humans respected this invisible line, stopping their mounts and continuing their observation from that position. Sierra watched through wary eyes as one human dismounted, moving with deliberate slowness. This one was smaller than the others, with a covering of long hair that caught the breeze. The human removed something from a pack attached to the saddle, a peculiar apparatus that extended from eye to shoulder. Sierra couldn't know she was being photographed, her injuries documented by a wildlife biologist conducting population research. The smallest human spoke, gesturing towards Sierra and Echo. The others leaned forward in their saddles, focusing their attention on the injured mare and her foal. More discussion followed, with occasional glances toward the ridge where the wolf pack had disappeared. Sierra sensed rather than understood their interest. Something about her condition had captured their attention in a way that the other healthy horses had not. It was unsettling to be the focus of such scrutiny, and she shifted uneasily, her injured legs protesting the movement. Echo, curious despite the tension around him, attempted to step forward for a better look at these strange creatures. Sierra immediately blocked his path with her body, nickering a warning that needed no translation across species. Stay back. Danger. The humans continued their observation for what seemed to Sierra an eternity, but was perhaps 20 minutes. Then, with apparent decision reached, they mounted up and moved away from the creek, heading not back over the ridge but parallel to it, following the water's course downstream. Thunder maintained his vigilant stance until the humans were well beyond the herd's immediate vicinity. Only then did he relax slightly, though his attention remained focused in the direction they had gone. The other horses, too, stayed alert, their bodies oriented toward potential flight despite the humans' departure. Sierra felt conflicting emotions as the immediate threat receded. Relief, certainly, that no attempt had been made to approach or capture them, but also a lingering unease. The humans' interest in her specifically suggested a potential return, a future encounter she was in no condition to flee. As the tension gradually dissipated, the herd returned to drinking and grazing, though with heightened awareness of their surroundings. Echo, his curiosity undimmed by the brief scare, began to explore the creek's edge under Dawn's watchful eye. Sierra found herself unexpectedly grateful for the surrogate mare's presence, allowing her to conserve the limited energy her battered body possessed. Dust had not fled with the bachelor band. Instead, he had maintained position at a middle distance, far enough to avoid challenging Thunder's authority, but close enough to render aid if needed. Now, with the humans gone, he approached the creek once more, drinking upstream from the main herd. Sierra watched him with renewed appreciation. His intervention had saved her and Echo from the wolves, and his strategic recruitment of the bachelor band had secured their access to water. Now his continued presence offered additional protection against predators that might target her in her weakened state. As the day progressed, Sierra managed to graze near the creek, the nourishment and hydration gradually rebuilding some of her depleted strength. Her wounds still throbbed with each movement, but the cool water had reduced some of the inflammation. She even managed to cross the shallow creek when the herd moved to the eastern bank in search of better grazing, though the effort left her trembling with exertion. Echo divided his time between Sierra and Dawn, nursing from the surrogate mare when hunger demanded, but returning to his mother for comfort and familiarity. Sierra noted with mixed emotions how the arrangement seemed to be healing something in Dawn as well. The grieving mare's movements becoming more purposeful, her eyes more alert as she took on the responsibility of protecting another's foal. As afternoon faded toward evening, Sierra became aware of a new sound. Distant at first, then gradually approaching. Not wolves this time, nor humans on horseback. This was mechanical, the distinctive rumble of what humans called vehicles. The sound carried from beyond the eastern ridge, growing steadily louder. Thunder reacted immediately, gathering the herd with purposeful movements. Retreat seemed the obvious choice, but Sierra knew with sinking certainty that she could not manage another rigorous journey. The day's exertions had depleted what little reserve she had rebuilt, and her injured legs were once again trembling even at rest. The mechanical sounds grew louder still, accompanied now by an unfamiliar rhythmic pounding that seemed to rattle the very earth beneath their hooves. From their elevated position on the creek bank, the herd could see dust rising beyond the ridge as whatever approached grew nearer. Then cresting the ridge in a cloud of dust and diesel fumes came the helicopter, a machine Sierra and most of the herd had never encountered. Its rotors created a thunderous beating that sent horses scattering in terror, their instinctive flight response triggered by the unnatural noise and movement. Thunder trumpeted a warning, then began to lead the main herd away from the mechanical threat, moving at a swift gallop that Sierra could not hope to match. Dawn hesitated, torn between following the herd and staying with Echo. Sierra nickered urgently, pushing Echo toward the fleeing mare with her muzzle. Go. Run. Stay with them. Echo resisted, unwilling to leave his mother, but another nudge from Sierra and Dawn's gentle coaxing finally convinced him. With a last backward glance, the foal galloped after the surrogate mare, his small legs stretching to match her pace as they followed Thunder and the retreating herd. Sierra stood alone on the creek bank, watching her herd, her family, disappear over the western ridge. Dust, too, had vanished, though whether with the bachelor band or in another direction, she couldn't be sure. Even the wolves had fled the unnatural intrusion, leaving tracks in the muddy creek bank as testament to their hasty departure. The helicopter continued its approach, dropping lower as it neared the creek. Behind it, now visible cresting the ridge, came several large vehicles, trucks pulling long trailers that Sierra couldn't know were horse transporters. Humans had returned in force, with technology and numbers that no wild horse could hope to evade. Sierra's instinct screamed at her to run, to ignore the pain and weakness and flee this overwhelming threat. But her body had reached its limit. The most she could manage was a halting trot away from the creek, each step an exercise in agony as her wounded legs struggled to support her weight. She had covered perhaps 50 yards when her injured right hind leg buckled completely. Sierra crashed to the ground, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Desperately, she tried to rise, but her body refused to obey the commands of terror and instinct. She was spent, utterly depleted. Through the swirling dust and rotor wash, human figures approached, cautiously at first, then with greater confidence as they realized she could not flee. Sierra's breathing came in rapid, shallow pants, her eyes rolling white with fear as the two-legged creatures closed the distance. The smallest human, the one with the long hair, approached first, speaking in low, steady tones that somehow penetrated Sierra's panic. The sounds meant nothing to her, but their rhythm held a quality that was neither threatening nor aggressive. The human extended a hand, palm flat, stopping just short of contact. Sierra's nostrils flared as she caught the human's scent. Unfamiliar yet not entirely foreign. There were traces of horse, of grass, of the natural world mixed with the artificial. The human remained still, continuing the soft vocalizations while maintaining a non-threatening posture. Gradually, Sierra's breathing slowed. The initial surge of terror receded, replaced by wary observation. The human made no attempt to touch her, merely maintaining position while another approached carrying what appeared to be a container of water. This second human poured some into a shallow bowl, then set it within Sierra's reach before backing away. Thirst eventually overcame fear. Sierra stretched her neck toward the offering, the cool water soothing her parched throat. As she drank, more humans gathered at a respectful distance, speaking quietly among themselves while observing her condition. The first human, who Sierra couldn't know was a veterinarian specializing in wild horses, made a careful circuit around her fallen form, assessing her injuries without touching her. At one point, the human produced a small device that made a quick clicking sound, capturing images of the wolf bites and other wounds. More discussion followed, with occasional gestures towards Sierra and the direction in which the herd had fled. Decision reached, the humans dispersed to their vehicles, returning with various equipment whose purpose Sierra could not fathom. Among these was a stretcher designed for large animals and several containers of medical supplies. What followed was a carefully orchestrated intervention. The veterinarian prepared a syringe while others positioned the stretcher nearby. Sierra watched through increasingly heavy-lidded eyes as the human approached once more, speaking in that same soothing cadence. When the injection came, a quick, sharp pain in her neck muscle, Sierra barely had the energy to flinch. Warmth spread through her body, followed by a heaviness that seemed to press her into the earth. Sierra fought against the encroaching darkness, instinct warning that to surrender consciousness was to surrender life itself. But the sedative was powerful, designed to work quickly on an animal already weakened by injury and exertion. Her last coherent thought before darkness claimed her was of Echo, her beautiful foal, now galloping with the herd under Dawn's protection. Would she ever see him again? Would he remember her if she did? Or would he, with the resilience of youth, adapt to his new reality with Dawn as his mother figure? The questions faded as consciousness slipped away, leaving Sierra floating in a void between life and death, wild and captive, past and uncertain future. Human hands, gentle but firm, began the work of healing what tooth and claw had torn asunder. Sierra drifted through layers of awareness, occasionally surfacing to fragmented perceptions, before sinking once more into medicated oblivion. Strange smells, antiseptic and artificial, filled her nostrils. Unfamiliar sounds, human voices, mechanical hums, the nickering of domestic horses nearby, filtered through her consciousness. When she finally woke fully, the world had transformed in ways her wild mind struggled to comprehend. She was lying on a bed of clean straw in an enclosed space, a stall in the rehabilitation facility, though she had no concept for such things. 3 walls and a partial barrier created a space both confining and protective. Above, a roof blocked the sky, replaced by artificial lighting that mimicked daylight but lacked its warmth and variation. Sierra attempted to rise, panic flaring as her body responded sluggishly to commands. Her injured legs had been treated and bandaged, the wounds cleaned and stitched during her sedated state. An intravenous line, incomprehensible to her, delivered fluids and medication through a catheter in her neck. The sensation was foreign, uncomfortable but not painful. A soft nickering caught her attention. In an adjacent stall, visible through the bars of the partial wall, stood another horse, a bay gelding with the calm demeanor of one long accustomed to human presence. He regarded Sierra with gentle interest, neither threatening nor afraid. His presence offered a strange comfort in this alien environment, a familiar form amid unfamiliar surroundings. Sierra's ears pivoted at the sound of approaching footsteps. Small human with long hair, Dr. Elena Reyes, though Sierra would never know her name, appeared at the stall entrance, speaking in the same soothing tones Sierra recalled from the creek bank. The human carried something in her hands, a container of fresh water, which she placed within Sierra's reach before backing away to a non-threatening distance. Thirst overcame wariness. Sierra stretched her neck toward the offering, drinking deeply of the clean, cool water. As she did so, the human continued speaking, the rhythm of her voice creating a strange counterpoint to Sierra's fear. There was something in that voice, a quality that seemed to bridge the vast gulf between their species, that spoke to something primal in Sierra's awareness. Over the next hours, other humans came and went, always maintaining a respectful distance, always moving with deliberate slowness that acknowledged her wild nature. Sierra watched them warily, alert for any threatening movement, but gradually the constant state of fear began to exhaust itself. The humans brought food, fresh hay unlike the wild grasses of her range but nourishing nonetheless, and periodically checked the strange apparatus attached to her neck. Through it all, Sierra's thoughts returned repeatedly to Echo. Where was he now? Had the herd found safety? Was Dawn providing the protection and guidance a growing foal needed? The separation created an ache deeper than her physical wounds, a hollow space that food and water could not fill. As sunlight began to fade beyond the high windows of the facility, casting the interior in deepening shadow, Sierra managed to rise to a standing position. Her legs trembled with the effort, but the bandaged wounds supported her weight better than she had expected. The mysterious interventions of the humans had begun their work, though she couldn't comprehend the nature of the antibiotics and anti-inflammatories now flowing through her system. Dr. Reyes returned as Sierra was testing her ability to stand, watching from the stall entrance with professional interest. She made notes on a small device, then spoke into another that Sierra couldn't know was a phone, communicating her patient's progress to colleagues. When she finally approached Sierra directly, it was with the same careful respect that had characterized all their interactions. The human extended a hand, palm flat, stopping just short of contact, offering connection rather than demanding it. Sierra remained motionless, neither accepting nor rejecting the overture. Dr. Reyes nodded, as if this response confirmed something important, then withdrew her hand and left the stall, securing the gate behind her. As darkness settled over the facility, lights dimmed to a soft glow that illuminated without glaring. The domestic horses in nearby stalls settled for the night, with contented sighs and the occasional soft nicker. Outside, beyond the building's walls, an owl called into the Wyoming night, a sound so familiar that it sent a pang of homesickness through Sierra's chest. This was not her world, not the open range where generations of her ancestors had run free, where Echo should be growing into the strength and beauty that was his birthright. This place of walls and artificial light, of human hands and domesticated neighbors, was as alien to her nature as the surface of the moon. Yet it was also undeniably a place of healing. With each passing hour, the pain in her wounds diminished. The weakness that had nearly cost her life on the creek bank was gradually receding under the influence of proper nutrition and medical care. For all its strangeness, this human place was allowing her body to mend in ways that would have been impossible in the wild. Sierra lowered herself carefully back to the straw bedding, the day's exertions having depleted her limited reserves. As sleep approached, her mind filled with images of the herd, of Thunder's vigilant leadership, of Willow's gentle wisdom, of Dust's unexpected intervention, of Dawn's surrogate care for Echo. Most of all, she saw her foal running with the awkward grace of youth across the valley they called home. Will I ever return there? The question had no answer as consciousness faded into dreams of open skies and endless grass. What Sierra couldn't know as sleep claimed her was that fate had not finished weaving the complex tapestry of her story, nor Echo's. Beyond the walls of the rehabilitation facility, out in the wild ranges where her herd still ran, unexpected developments were unfolding that would challenge everything about the natural order she had known. And in a small office adjacent to the treatment area, Dr. Reyes was making a phone call to a colleague who specialized in wild horse behavior and reintegration. A call that would set in motion events that would determine whether Sierra's separation from Echo would be temporary or permanent. The digital calendar on the wall displayed the date Sierra couldn't read and a notation she couldn't comprehend. Potential release candidate, pending recovery and assessment, 28 days maximum captivity for minimizing habituation. A clock was ticking on Sierra's wild nature, on Echo's memory of his mother, on the window during which reintegration remained possible. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the facility, wolves howled at a moon that shone on both captive and free, on both predator and prey, indifferent to the struggles playing out beneath its silver light. Days passed in the rehabilitation facility, each one bringing incremental improvements to Sierra's condition. The wounds on her hind legs began to heal under the diligent care of Dr. Reyes and her team. The bandages were changed regularly, medicinal ointments applied to prevent infection, and specialized wraps provided support as she relearned to bear weight on her injured limbs. Sierra's initial terror at human proximity gradually gave way to wary tolerance. She neither welcomed their touch nor panicked at their approach, maintaining the cautious distance that defined her wild nature while accepting the care that was saving her life. It was a delicate balance, allowing enough handling for medical necessity while preventing the habituation that would make her unable to return to the wild. Dr. Reyes understood this balance intimately. Her 20 years of working with injured Mustangs had taught her that rehabilitation wasn't simply about healing physical wounds. It was about preserving the essential wildness that made these horses who they were. Every interaction was carefully calibrated, every procedure designed to minimize trauma in human bonding. "She's maintaining good boundaries," she explained to her assistant one morning as they observed Sierra drinking from the water trough. "Notice how she stops when we approach, maintains eye contact, and resumes only when she determines we're not a threat. That's exactly what we want to see." Sierra, unaware of the significance of her behavior, focused on rebuilding her strength. Each day she spent longer periods standing, putting gradually increasing weight on her healing legs. The mysterious substances the humans added to her food, vitamin supplements, and mild pain relievers, helped manage her discomfort while her body repaired itself. The domestic gelding in the adjacent stall, a retired ranch horse named Comanche who served as a calming presence for wild Mustangs in rehabilitation, continued his gentle overtures of friendship. His quiet nickering and non-threatening posture offered Sierra a bridge between her wild existence and this temporary captivity. She found herself responding to his presence, occasionally exchanging soft vocalizations across the partial wall that separated them. On the 7th day of her captivity, Sierra was deemed strong enough for her first venture outside the stall. The intravenous line had been removed, her wounds were healing cleanly, and the veterinary team wanted to assess her mobility in a larger space. With careful planning and minimal human presence, they opened her stall into a small round pen adjacent to the rehabilitation barn. Sierra stepped cautiously into the sunlight, her senses overwhelmed by the sudden expansion of her world. The feel of dirt beneath her hooves, the scent of sage carried on the breeze, the sight of distant mountains beyond the facility's perimeter, all sent a surge of homesickness through her chest. She moved stiffly at first, her healing legs unaccustomed to unrestricted movement after days of confinement. But as minutes passed, muscle memory began to reassert itself. Sierra walked the perimeter of the round pen, her gait gradually smoothing as her body remembered patterns established over years of free movement across the range. She even attempted a brief trot, though the effort clearly taxed her recovering strength. Dr. Reyes observed from outside the pen, making notes on Sierra's progress. Good extension, minimal favoring of the right hind. Wound sites holding stable during movement. Alert and responsive to environmental stimuli without excessive stress response. What the veterinarian's clinical assessment couldn't capture was the surge of life that flowed through Sierra's body as she moved under open sky once more. For all its limitations, the round pen offered a taste of freedom that awakened dormant parts of her spirit. She lifted her head into the wind, drawing in scents from miles away, including, tantalizingly, the faint trace of wild horses. Her herd was out there somewhere, beyond the human boundaries. Echo was out there. The thought of her foal brought both pain and renewed determination. Sierra increased her pace, pushing against the limits of her healing body. She would need her strength to return to him, to reclaim her place in the natural world that was her birthright. Each step in this small circle of dirt was a step toward reunion with Echo and the herd. Unknown to Sierra, this same determination was being noted and measured by the rehabilitation team. Her behavior, her clear orientation toward the distant ranges, her maintenance of wild instincts despite captivity, her resistance to human bonding, all were positive indicators for potential release. "She's a good candidate," Dr. Reyes told the facility director that evening, reviewing the day's observations. "Strong maternal motivation, clear herd orientation, Appropriate caution with humans. If her physical recovery continues at this pace, I'd recommend beginning release protocols within 2 weeks. The director nodded thoughtfully. The bureau guys mentioned her foal is still with the herd. Their field team spotted them yesterday near the eastern ridge. The surrogate mare has fully adopted him. Dr. Reyes frowned slightly at this information. That complicates things. We'll need to time the release carefully. Close enough to the herd for her to find them, but with consideration for the new bond between the foal and surrogate. Nature's already adapting to her absence. Nature always adapts, the director replied. The question is whether we're helping or hindering by intervening. It was an old debate in wildlife rehabilitation, the complex ethical calculus of human intervention in natural processes. For every injured animal they saved, questions lingered about the broader impact on natural selection, population dynamics, and the delicate balance of predator and prey. For Sierra, these philosophical debates held no meaning. Her world had narrowed to immediate concerns: healing, regaining strength, and the primal longing for her foal and herd. With each passing day, her leg wounds closed further, her muscle tone improved, and her endurance increased during the daily sessions in the round pen. By the end of the second week, she was able to sustain a trot for several minutes without signs of pain or fatigue. The veterinary team began reducing her pain medication, monitoring carefully for signs of distress. Sierra passed this milestone with the stoic resilience that characterized Mustangs, acknowledging pain without surrendering to it. The third week brought a new development. Sierra was moved to a larger enclosure, a 1-acre paddock at the edge of the facility with a direct view of the distant ranges where her herd roamed. This transition marked a significant step in the rehabilitation protocol, testing her independence and natural behaviors with minimal human oversight. Sierra approached this expanded territory with cautious enthusiasm. The larger space allowed her to move more naturally, to practice the extended walking and occasional cantering that would be essential for survival in the wild. She spent hours at the perimeter fence, gaze fixed on the horizon, nostrils flaring as she tested the wind for familiar scents. It was during her third day in the paddock that she caught a scent that sent a jolt of recognition through her body. Wolf. Not just any wolf, but the distinctive musk of the alpha who had led the attacks against her and Echo. The predator was nowhere visible, but the scent was unmistakable, carried on the wind from the surrounding wilderness. Sierra's reaction was immediate and instinctive. She moved away from the perimeter, positioning herself where she could observe all approaches, her body tense with alertness. The behavior did not go unnoticed by the facility staff. Predator response intact, Dr. Reyes noted with satisfaction. No loss of appropriate wariness despite captivity. What the humans couldn't know was the complex mixture of fear and determination coursing through Sierra's consciousness. The wolf scent had triggered traumatic memories, yes, but it had also reinforced her urgent need to return to Echo. If predators were active in the territories near the rehabilitation facility, they were also present near her vulnerable foal. The following days brought increased restlessness. Sierra paced the paddock boundaries, testing different sections of the fence, her focus increasingly fixed on the distant wilderness. She maintained condition, eating the provided hay and drinking regularly, but her behavior clearly communicated a growing impatience with captivity. Dr. Reyes recognized the signs. She's ready, she told the team during their weekly assessment meeting. Physically, she's at about 85% of optimal condition. The leg wounds have healed cleanly, she's maintaining weight, and her movement patterns show appropriate compensation without long-term impairment. Behaviorally, she's showing all the indicators of readiness for release: increased territorial patrolling, orientation toward the ranges, and appropriate responses to environmental stimuli. The decision was made. Sierra would be released at the end of the 4th week, near but not directly with her original herd. This approach would allow her the opportunity to rejoin them while respecting the new dynamics that had undoubtedly developed in her absence. As preparations for release began, Sierra remained unaware of the human deliberations that would shape her future. Her world remained divided into simple categories: captivity and freedom, safety and danger, separation and reunion. Every sunrise brought her closer to resolution, one way or another. On the morning scheduled for her release, activity around the facility increased. Vehicles arrived, equipment was prepared, and the human voices carried tones of purposeful excitement. Sierra watched with heightened alertness, sensing the change without understanding its nature. Dr. Reyes approached the paddock fence, speaking in the same calm tones she had used since Sierra's arrival. Though the words meant nothing to the Mustang, their rhythm had become familiar, almost a touchstone in this strange, captive existence. "Today you go home," the veterinarian said softly. "Back to your mountains, your herd, your foal. You've been an exceptional patient, Sierra. Strong and resilient, exactly as nature designed you." Sierra regarded the human with her usual wary attention, noting the presence of the familiar trailer that had transported her to this place of walls and fences. Understanding dawned with crystalline clarity. Change was coming. Whether it meant deeper captivity or long-awaited freedom remained to be seen. Hours later, that question was answered as the trailer doors swung open onto an expanse of sage-covered terrain that Sierra recognized immediately. They were on the eastern edge of her herd's traditional range, perhaps 5 miles from where she had last seen Echo and the others. The familiar sense of juniper, wild grasses, and the distinctive mineral composition of home territory flooded her nostrils. Sierra remained motionless in the trailer, the threshold between captivity and freedom suddenly daunting in its finality. Behind her stood the known environment of human care: regular food, protection from predators, intervention against pain. Before her stretched the unforgiving wilderness, beautiful, free, and indifferent to individual survival. Dr. Reyes and her team maintained distance, allowing Sierra to make this transition without human pressure. They had done everything possible to prepare her for this moment, healing her wounds, preserving her wild instincts, strengthening her body for the challenges ahead. Now the choice had to be hers. Sierra took a tentative step forward, then another, her hooves touching natural ground for the first time in nearly a month. The sensation sent a tremor through her body, a recognition so primal it transcended conscious thought. This was where she belonged. This was what she was born for. With sudden decision, Sierra leaped from the trailer and broke into a canter across the open range, her healed legs easily absorbing the impact of movement more natural than any she had attempted in captivity. She ran not from the humans who had saved her, but toward something more powerful than fear or caution, toward home, toward herd, toward Echo. Dr. Reyes watched through binoculars as the Mustang mare grew smaller against the vast Wyoming landscape. "Godspeed," she whispered, though she knew Sierra neither heard nor comprehended the blessing. "Find your foal." Sierra ran until the trailer and humans disappeared from view, then moderated her pace to the ground-covering trot that Mustangs could maintain for hours. Her body remembered the way, following invisible paths worn into genetic memory over countless generations of wild horses who had navigated these same ranges. As the afternoon sun began its westward descent, Sierra paused on a ridge overlooking a familiar valley. Below, barely visible at this distance, dark shapes moved across the grassland, horses grazing with the relaxed vigilance of herd animals in their home territory. Sierra's heightened senses identified them immediately, even before specific individuals became distinguishable. Her herd, her family, and somewhere among them, Echo. Sierra released a loud, piercing whinny that carried across the valley, an announcement of presence, of return, of reclamation. Then she began the descent toward reunion, toward whatever welcome or rejection awaited her after the unnatural separation imposed by injury and human intervention. The herd had sensed her approach before her call, heads lifting in unison to track the lone horse approaching from the eastern ridge. Thunder moved to the group's perimeter, positioning himself between the potential threat and his charges. Even at a distance, Sierra could see the stallion's posture of alert assessment. She approached at a deliberate walk, neither hesitant nor aggressive, allowing Thunder to recognize her scent and appearance as she drew nearer. Recognition came in stages. First, the awareness that this was a Mustang, not a predator, then identification of her as female, not a challenging male, and finally, the moment when memory connected with present perception. Thunder's posture shifted subtly, the aggressive protection melting into cautious welcome. He nickered softly, an acknowledgement of her return that carried complex emotional and social dimensions no human language could adequately translate. "You were gone. You are back." The herd continues. Sierra responded with a gentle whicker, accepting both his authority and his welcome. There was no dramatic reunion, no human-imagined scene of joyful recognition, merely the quiet reintegration of a herd member whose absence had been absorbed into the group's ongoing existence. As Sierra moved past Thunder into the main body of the herd, familiar faces greeted her with varying degrees of recognition. Willow approached first, the old mare touching noses briefly before returning to grazing, an understated welcome characteristic of her dignified nature. Other mares acknowledged Sierra's return with similar restraint, the complex social bonds of the herd reasserting themselves without drama. Sierra searched the assembled horses for Echo, her maternal instinct intensifying with each moment. Where was her foal? Had he survived in her absence? Had Dawn maintained her surrogate protection? Her questions were answered as the herd parted slightly, revealing Dawn grazing peacefully with Echo at her side. The foal had grown in the month of separation, his legs longer, his body more substantial, his coat developing the rich complexity that would characterize his adult coloration. He was thriving, clearly bonded to his surrogate mother, but fundamentally healthy and well integrated into the herd. Sierra approached cautiously, uncertain of her reception after the extended separation. Would Echo remember her? Would he accept her return, or had Dawn fully replaced her in his young consciousness? Dawn noticed her first, the surrogate mare's head lifting sharply as Sierra drew nearer. There was momentary tension in her posture, not aggression but protective concern, the instinctive reaction of a mother figure toward a potential threat to her charge. Then recognition dawned, and Dawn's posture softened into something more complex. Acknowledgement tinged with uncertainty about what Sierra's return meant for the new bond she had formed with Echo. The foal, catching Dawn's shift in attention, turned to observe the approaching horse. Sierra stopped several yards away, allowing Echo to make the choice about their reunion. He stared at her, his young mind processing visual cues against fading memories of his birth mother. For a heart-stopping moment, there was no recognition in his gaze. Sierra felt a wave of grief threatening to overwhelm her hard-won composure. Had she lost him after all? Not to predators or starvation, but to the simple passage of time and the formation of new bonds? Then Echo's nostrils flared as he caught her scent, the unique olfactory signature that had been his first sensory experience of the world. Something awakened in his awareness, a connection that transcended the weeks of separation. He took a tentative step towards Sierra, then another, his movements growing more confident with each stride. When they finally stood face to face, Sierra lowered her head to her foal's level, breathing softly against his muzzle in the greeting that had been there since his birth. Echo remained still for a moment, absorbing her presence, reconciling memory with current reality. Then, with the simple acceptance characteristic of the young, he pressed his head against her neck in unmistakable recognition. Sierra's body relaxed, relief flowing through her like a physical wave. He remembered. Despite separation, despite Dawn's surrogate care, despite the natural adaptability of youth, Echo remembered his mother. Dawn watched this reunion from a short distance, her posture communicating complicated emotions no human observer could fully decode. There was acceptance of Sierra's return, acknowledgement of the primal bond between birth mother and offspring, but also the unmistakable attachment she had formed with Echo during the weeks of surrogate care. What followed was not the either-or scenario human observers might have expected, but something more nuanced and characteristic of Mustang social structures. Echo moved between the two mares with increasing comfort, accepting nurturing from both, creating a new dynamic that accommodated the complex reality of his young life. Dawn and Sierra established a tentative cooperative relationship, neither challenging the other directly, both focused on the foal's well-being above individual claim. As twilight settled over the valley, the herd grouped for the night in their usual protective formation. Sierra found herself welcomed back into the arrangement, positioned neither at the vulnerable center nor the protective periphery, but somewhere between, her status altered but not diminished by her absence and return. Echo settled between Sierra and Dawn, the young foal's simple presence creating a bridge between mares who might otherwise have become rivals. His body pressed against the Sierra's warmth, as he had in the early days of his life, while Dawn maintained protective proximity on his other side. Above them, stars emerged in the vast Wyoming sky, the same stars that had shone on Sierra's desperate flight from wolves, on her near-fatal injury, on her time in human care, and now on her return to the wild existence that was her birthright. The celestial perspective offered silent testament to the temporary nature of all struggles, all separations, all reunions. As Sierra drifted toward sleep, surrounded by the quiet sounds of the herd, a distant howl echoed across the valley, wolf song carrying on the night wind. The sound triggered no panic now, no desperate fear, merely alert awareness. She was not alone facing predators, not weakened by injury and isolation. She was heard, she was whole, she was home. The wolves would always be there in the darkness, So would drought, winter storms, human interventions, and all the other challenges that shaped Mustang existence. But for this moment under the ancient stars, Sierra had reclaimed her place in the natural order, not unchanged by her ordeal, but fundamentally undiminished. Echo sighed in his sleep, his small body trustingly nestled against hers. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new growth, new dangers. But tonight the broken circle had been remade. Mother and son, separated by circumstance but reunited by resilience, slept peacefully in the heart of the herd. And at the periphery of that herd, maintaining solitary vigil from a nearby ridge, the unmistakable silhouette of dust stood against the starlit sky. The aging bachelor stallion watching over the mare he had saved, and the foal who carried the future of their wild bloodline. Summer faded into autumn with the gradual inevitability of wild places. The valley grasses turned from vibrant green to gold, then amber, their seed heads heavy with the promise of future growth. Crisp mornings gave way to sun-warmed afternoons, the temperature fluctuations growing more pronounced as the season deepened. The herd adapted as they had for countless generations, their bodies adding the crucial layer of fat that would sustain them through the coming winter. Echo thrived under the unusual dual nurturing of Sierra and Dawn. The arrangement, unprecedented in the herd's recent history, had settled into a functional dynamic that benefited the growing foal. From Sierra, he learned the subtle language of the wild, how to read the wind, how to detect predators, how to find water in hidden places when obvious sources ran dry. From Dawn, he gained additional protection, comfort during Sierra's occasional absences, and the social advantages of having two advocates within the herd hierarchy. Sierra's own recovery had progressed beyond what might have seemed possible in those desperate moments by the creek. The wolf bites had healed completely, leaving only subtle scars visible when her winter coat failed to grow in those specific patterns. Her gait retained a slight unevenness when she was tired or cold, but otherwise showed little evidence of the wounds that had nearly claimed her life. The human intervention, so alien and frightening at the time, had faded into a strange dreamlike memory, relevant only for the healing it had provided. Sierra had returned fully to her wild nature, as wary of human presence as she had been before her captivity. When Dr. Reyes and her team conducted their periodic aerial observations of the herd, Sierra showed no recognition, merely the appropriate caution of a wild Mustang toward potential threat. The truce between Sierra and Dawn had evolved into something approaching friendship. The grief-stricken mare, who had found purpose in caring for another's foal, had healed in her own way, regaining the social engagement that had been absent since her loss. The two mares often grazed near each other, shared waterhole access without conflict, and occasionally engaged in mutual grooming, a behavior typically reserved for established allies within the herd structure. Echo, meanwhile, had grown from the spindly newborn of spring into a sturdy 6-month-old, with the first hints of the powerful stallion he might become. His coat had darkened from its full coloring to a rich bay that promised to match Thunder's midnight beauty at maturity. His legs had lengthened, his chest deepened, and his movements gained the coordination that would eventually transform into the fluid grace of an adult Mustang. Most significantly, his personality had begun to emerge, curious, bold, with the natural caution necessary for survival, but an exploratory streak that occasionally tested Sierra's vigilance. He was quick to investigate new terrain features, eager to engage other foals in play fighting that mimicked the serious contests they would face as adults, and remarkably observant of subtle changes in the herd's environment. "That one's going to be trouble," Willow had commented to Sierra in the silent language of equine communication, watching Echo race along the ridge with another colt. The old mare's observation held no criticism, merely the wisdom of one who had seen many foals grow to maturity, and recognized the specific combination of intelligence and daring that made Echo exceptional. Sierra had merely nickered in agreement, pride and concern mingling in her awareness. Echo's boldness would serve him well if he survived to adulthood, but it also increased the risks he faced in a landscape unforgiving of reckless youth. Now, as autumn deepened toward winter, the herd's patterns shifted with the seasonal imperatives. Thunder led them to lower elevations where windswept slopes would provide grazing even after snowfall. The route took them through familiar territory, including the creek bank, where Sierra had nearly lost her life to the wolf pack. As they approached this location, Sierra found herself unusually alert, memories of pain and fear briefly resurging despite the months that had passed. Echo, sensing his mother's tension, stayed closer than his independent nature typically allowed, his young body pressing against hers in unconscious comfort. The wolf pack's scent still lingered in the area, but it was stale, a marker of territory rather than immediate presence. The predators had shifted their hunting grounds with the changing season, following the elk and deer herds to lower elevations just as the Mustangs were doing. This natural separation provided a temporary respite in the eternal dance of predator and prey. At the creek's edge, the herd paused to drink and graze on the still, green vegetation that grew along the water. Sierra watched Echo splash playfully in the shallows, striking at the water with his front hooves in a behavior typical of young horses discovering the properties of their environment. His joy in simple existence, his untroubled engagement with the present moment, offered silent testimony to the resilience of wild things. The past, whether triumph or tragedy, held no power over him. Only the now existed in Echo's awareness, with its immediate pleasures and challenges, its opportunities for growth and discovery. Sierra found herself absorbing this lesson from her son, allowing the sight of her near death to be transformed by his innocent play. A movement on the distant ridge caught her attention. Sierra's head lifted sharply, eyes focusing on the silhouette visible against the autumn sky. The distinctive profile was immediately recognizable. Dust, the aging bachelor stallion who had saved her from the wolves and then disappeared back into solitary existence. He had been a shadow presence throughout the months since her return, occasionally visible watching over the herd from a distance, but never approaching directly. Thunder tolerated this vigilant observation with unusual forbearance, perhaps recognizing that the old stallion posed no challenge to his leadership. The bachelor band that had briefly assembled under Dust's influence had dispersed, leaving him once again solitary, but he had not wandered from the territories adjacent to the herd's range. Now, as if aware of Sierra's attention, Dust lifted his head in acknowledgement. The distance was too great for direct communication, but the simple fact of his continued presence carried meaning. He had not abandoned his self-appointed role as distant guardian, maintaining watch over the mare he had saved and the foal who represented a continuation of their shared bloodline. Sierra's thoughts were interrupted by Echo's return to her side, water dripping from his muzzle as he nudged her playfully. The interaction drew her attention back to the immediate realities of herd life and maternal responsibility. When she looked again toward the ridge, Dust had vanished, a temporary apparition against the autumn sky. Thunder signaled movement, and the herd continued their journey toward winter grounds. The descent through mountain passes into the more sheltered valley beyond was a familiar migration, one the herd had undertaken each year within living memory. Sierra fell into the rhythmic pace, Echo trotting alongside, occasionally racing ahead with the boundless energy of youth before circling back to her side. On the third day of their migration, as they traversed a narrow pass between towering rock formations, the first snow began to fall. Not the heavy blanket that would come in deepest winter, but a gentle dusting that transformed the landscape into crystalline beauty. Echo, experiencing snow for the first time in his conscious memory, stopped in wonder, lifting his muzzle to catch the falling flakes. Sierra watched his discovery with the complex emotions that characterize motherhood across species: joy in his experience, nostalgia for her own first snow, concern for the harsh season it heralded. Dawn, grazing nearby, approached to share the moment, her presence now a comfortable extension of their unusual family structure. The three stood together as snow gathered on their backs and manes, Sierra with her battle scars and hard-won wisdom, Dawn with her grief transformed into renewed purpose, and Echo with his limitless potential and untested future. Around them, the herd continued their steady movement through the pass, accepting the changing weather as they accepted all natural transitions. That night, as darkness claimed the mountains and the snowfall intensified, the herd gathered in a sheltered hollow below the tree line. The Mustangs positioned themselves strategically, the strongest adults breaking the wind for the more vulnerable members. Sierra found herself near the center of this formation, Echo pressed against her side for warmth, Dawn completing their small family circle. The snow continued through the night, accumulating several inches by dawn. The herd woke to a transformed world, familiar landmarks softened by white, scents muted beneath the fresh precipitation, sounds dampened by the insulating blanket of snow. For Echo and the other foals born that spring, it was a magical discovery. For the adults, a familiar challenge to be navigated with pragmatic acceptance. Thunder led them onward, his dark coat a stark contrast against the pristine landscape. Their pace slowed necessarily, each step requiring more energy as hooves broke through the snow cover to the ground beneath. Echo bounded through the drifts with puppy-like enthusiasm, expending precious energy in playful exploration that the adult horses conserved with practiced efficiency. By midday, the snowfall had ceased, leaving a brilliantly clear sky overhead. The sun reflected blindingly off the white terrain, creating a dazzling panorama of light and shadow. Sierra guided Echo toward sheltered patches where grazing remained possible, scraping aside snow with practiced movements to reach the dormant grass beneath. As the migration continued over subsequent days, the weather alternated between clear cold and additional snowfall. The herd's progress was slow but deliberate, Thunder selecting routes that balanced protection from the elements against accessibility of forage. Sierra noted with maternal pride how quickly Echo adapted to winter conditions, learning through observation and trial how to paw through snow for food, how to shelter his body against the wind, how to maintain warmth through strategic movement. A week into their journey, they reached the traditional wintering grounds, a broad valley protected by surrounding highlands, its southern exposure maximizing limited sunlight. Here the snow was thinner, blown clear from exposed ridges by the persistent wind, revealing patches of grasses preserved by the dry cold. Natural rock formations created windbreaks, and stands of juniper offered additional shelter during storms. The herd dispersed across this landscape in their usual pattern, maintaining connection through sight and sound while spreading out to utilize available forage efficiently. Sierra, Dawn, and Echo established themselves in a particularly favorable location, a shallow depression sheltered by rock outcroppings on three sides, with clear sight lines across the valley floor for predator detection. Winter settled fully upon the range, days shortening as the solstice approached. The rhythm of existence simplified to essential functions: grazing, resting, maintaining vigilance against threats both predatory and environmental. Echo's play with other foals became briefer, energy conservation taking precedence over social development as survival instincts sharpened under winter's harsh tutelage. Sierra found the season oddly peaceful despite its challenges. Her body had fully recovered its strength, her position within the herd was secure, and Echo's development proceeded with a robust health that suggested future excellence. Even the ever-present threat of predators seemed diminished, the wolf pack having followed elk herds to different territories, the mountain lions conserving energy through reduced hunting ranges. This relative tranquility was shattered one bitter morning when Echo failed to rise with his usual vigor. Sierra nuzzled him urgently, sensing immediately that something was wrong. His small body radiated excessive heat, his breathing came in shallow gasps, and his eyes lacked their typical brightness. Sierra's distress communicated itself to Dawn, who approached with concern evident in her posture. Together, the two mares examined the ailing foal, their movements betraying the anxiety neither could verbalize. Echo attempted to rise when urged, managed a few shaky steps, then collapsed back to the snow-covered ground, his strength clearly failing. Fear gripped Sierra's heart with icy clarity, a fear more profound than any predator had ever inspired. This was not an external threat she could fight or flee, but something invisible attacking Echo from within. Some infection or illness that her maternal protection could not combat. Dawn positioned herself on Echo's other side, providing additional warmth as the foal shivered despite his fever. Sierra stood guard, torn between the need to graze for sustenance and the instinct to remain with her ailing son. Other herd members, sensing the disruption to normal patterns, approached briefly before giving the small family unit respectful distance. Thunder himself came to investigate, the stallion's powerful presence a reminder of his ultimate responsibility for the herd's well-being. He examined Echo with surprising gentleness, then lifted his head to scan the valley as if searching for a solution beyond standard Mustang resources. Finding none, he returned to his monitoring of the larger group, though he remained unusually close to Sierra's position throughout the day. Echo's condition deteriorated as daylight faded. His breathing became more labored, his periods of awareness briefer and less coherent. Sierra refused to leave his side even to drink from the nearby snowmelt, her own body growing depleted as she maintained constant vigil. Dawn alternated between staying with them and briefly grazing nearby, bringing moisture to Echo by carrying snow in her mouth to his lips, a remarkable adaptation of nurturing behavior to crisis conditions. Night fell with terrible finality, the temperature dropping precipitously as stars emerged in the crystal-clear sky. Sierra and Dawn pressed against Echo from either side, their body heat the only medicine they could provide against whatever illness ravaged his small form. His shivering gradually subsided, but not from recovery, from the deepening grip of sickness that sapped his strength to respond even to discomfort. Sierra rested her head gently on Echo's neck, feeling the rapid, irregular pulse that signaled his struggle. Something primal and wordless passed between them. Not thoughts as humans would understand them, but a deep connection that transcended consciousness. Fight, stay, live. Echo's eyes fluttered open briefly, recognition flickering in their depths before exhaustion claimed him once more. Sierra maintained her position through the endless hours of darkness, Dawn a silent, steadfast presence on his other side. Occasionally, one or the other mare would rise to shift position, ensuring maximum warmth for the failing foal, but never leaving him exposed to the bitter night air. Toward dawn, Echo's breathing changed, becoming deeper, his chest rising and falling with greater difficulty, but also more regularity. Sierra sensed the subtle shift from decline toward crisis, the moment when his struggle would resolve one way or another. Dawn must have sensed it as well, as she nickered softly, a sound of encouragement and concern that seemed to reach Echo even in his semi-conscious state. The foal stirred, his legs twitching as if running in some internal dreamscape. Sierra nuzzled him gently, drawing his awareness back to the physical world and their presence. For a heart-stopping moment, he lay utterly still, then drew a great, shuddering breath that seemed to infuse his body with renewed vitality. Echo's eyes opened fully for the first time since falling ill, clear and present despite his obvious weakness. He made a valiant effort to rise, managed to get his forelegs under him before sinking back to the ground. But the attempt itself, the will to rise rather than surrender to weakness, kindled hope in Sierra's heart. Dawn immediately moved to gather clean snow, bringing the moisture to Echo's muzzle. He accepted it eagerly, the simple action of drinking another positive sign in his desperate battle. Sierra remained positioned against his side, sharing warmth and support as dawn gradually illuminated the winter landscape. As full daylight revealed the valley, an unexpected sight appeared on the ridge above their position. Dust stood silhouetted against the morning sky, his aging body still powerful despite the harsh winter conditions. The bachelor stallion had appeared as if summoned by Sierra's distress, his presence unexpected, yet somehow fitting in this moment of crisis. Dust studied the scene below with evident concern, his posture communicating recognition of Echo's illness even from that distance. After a moment's observation, the stallion disappeared from the ridgeline. Sierra, focused primarily on Echo's condition, noted his absence only peripherally, her attention consumed by her son's struggle for survival. Dawn continued bringing snow for Echo to drink, while Sierra encouraged him to try standing once more. Echo's second attempt proved more successful. Though wobbly, he managed to rise to all four legs and stand swaying for several moments before carefully lowering himself again. The effort clearly exhausted him, but demonstrated improving rather than declining strength. Sierra nickered encouragement, her anxiety easing fractionally at this positive sign. It was Dawn who first noticed Dust's return. The mare's head lifted sharply, drawing Sierra's attention to movement on the slope below the ridge. The bachelor stallion was descending carefully, picking his way through snow-covered rocks with deliberate precision. What drew both mares' focus, however, was what accompanied him, a distinctive scent carried on the morning breeze. Dust had located a patch of wild herbs growing in a sheltered microclimate created by rock formations and thermal springs, plants that retained their greenery and potency even in winter's grip. Among these was echinacea, a natural immune stimulant that generations of wild horses had instinctively consumed when fighting illness. Sierra recognized the medicinal scent immediately, memories awakening of her own dam guiding her to similar plants during a childhood illness. Dust approached cautiously, respecting the invisible boundaries that governed interactions between bachelor stallions and herd members. He stopped several yards away, dropping his gathered herbs onto a relatively clear patch of ground before retreating a respectful distance. The offering was unmistakable in its intent, though nothing in Mustang communication could express the complex reasoning behind it. Dawn moved first, collecting the herbs and bringing them to Echo's position. Sierra nudged her weakened foal, encouraging him to consume the bitter plants that instinct told her might help fight whatever infection had taken hold. Echo initially resisted the unfamiliar taste, but Sierra's persistent encouragement eventually convinced him to eat a small amount. The medicine, for that's what it was, though no wild horse could name it as such, might help or it might not. But the effort to obtain it, the collaboration between former herd stallion and current herd members, represented something profound about Mustang social structures that transcended simple survival mechanics. Dust remained at his respectful distance, neither approaching further nor departing, his watchful presence another form of support that required no direct interaction. Thunder, observing from his position with the main herd, made no move to challenge this unusual incursion into herd territory, another departure from typical stallion behavior that spoke to the exceptional circumstances. Throughout the day, Echo's condition fluctuated, periods of improved alertness followed by concerning lethargy, moments of appetite alternating with complete disinterest in sustenance. Sierra and Dawn maintained their vigil, offering water from melted snow and additional doses of the medicinal herbs Dust had provided. The bachelor stallion himself replenished the herb supply twice, bringing fresh plants from whatever hidden source he had discovered. By sunset, a subtle but definite improvement was evident in Echo's condition. His fever had diminished, his breathing had regularized, and he had managed several brief periods of standing without immediate collapse. The crisis had not passed entirely, but the trajectory had shifted from decline toward recovery. As darkness reclaimed the valley, the temperature plummeted once more. Sierra and Dawn resumed their positions on either side of Echo, sharing body heat through the bitter night. Dust, rather than returning to whatever solitary shelter he normally used, settled nearby, close enough to provide additional protection, but maintaining the separation required by complex herd politics. The night passed in tense but hopeful vigilance, dawn revealing Echo's continued improvement. The foal managed to stand independently and even walk a few halting steps, though weakness still evident in his movements. More significantly, he showed interest in grazing, pawing at the snow to reach the dormant grass beneath, a fundamental survival behavior indicating return of normal instincts. Sierra's relief manifested in renewed energy, her own needs for food and water becoming apparent now that Echo's immediate crisis had abated. Dawn remained with the foal while Sierra grazed nearby, replenishing her strength after the exhausting vigil. Dust had vanished with the morning light, returning to his solitary existence now that his intervention appeared successful. Over the next 3 days, Echo's recovery accelerated. His strength returned gradually, his periods of activity lengthening, while his need for rest diminished. The mysterious illness, perhaps a respiratory infection that might have proven fatal without the combined nurturing of Sierra, Dawn, and Dust's medicinal contribution, receded, leaving behind a somewhat thinner but fundamentally undiminished young Mustang. By the 4th day, Echo had rejoined the other foals in brief play sessions, his exuberance appropriately tempered by recent weakness, but his spirit clearly unbroken. Sierra watched his interactions with maternal pride, appreciating his resilience in ways that only near loss can illuminate. Dawn maintained her close connection to both Sierra and Echo, the surrogate relationship having evolved into something permanent and mutually beneficial. What had begun as substitution during Sierra's absence had transformed into genuine family bonds that strengthened all 3 horses' positions within the herd structure. Winter deepened, the solstice marking the gradual turning toward longer days, though temperatures continued to drop. The herd adapted as they had for generations, conserving energy, utilizing protective terrain features, maintaining the collective vigilance that had allowed Mustangs to survive in this harsh environment since their ancestors had returned to the American continent. Sierra found herself increasingly alert to Echo's health, checking him frequently for any signs of relapse or new illness. The close call had heightened her protective instincts, already strong, to nearly constant awareness. Dawn seemed to understand this hypervigilance, occasionally positioning herself to watch over Echo when Sierra's attention was necessarily diverted to her own needs. Thunder led the herd through the winter months with the steadfast leadership that had established his dominance years before. He coordinated movements between shelter and grazing opportunities, maintained awareness of predator activities in their territory, and enforced the hierarchical structure that prevented wasteful conflicts during times of scarcity. Dust remained a peripheral presence, occasionally visible on distant ridgelines, but never directly approaching the herd again after Echo's recovery. His intervention during the crisis had been exceptional rather than indicative of any permanent change in his solitary status. Yet Sierra found herself watching for him, a subtle awareness of his distant guardianship adding an unexpected dimension to her sense of security. The winter solstice passed, marking the imperceptible shift toward lengthening days, though the cold maintained its grip on the Wyoming wilderness. Snow continued to accumulate, occasional storms bringing fresh precipitation that further challenged the herd's survival strategies. Echo and the other foals born the previous spring were now technically yearlings, having survived the most dangerous period of Mustang development. January brought the season's worst blizzard, 3 days of howling winds and heavy snowfall that forced the herd into the most protected pocket of their winter territory. They stood in tight formation, bodies pressed together for warmth, heads lowered against the icy onslaught. Sierra and Dawn sheltered Echo between them, the young horse no longer small enough to be fully protected, but still benefiting from their windbreak effect. When the storm finally abated, they emerged to a transformed landscape. Snow had drifted against rock formations, creating walls taller than the horses themselves. Vegetation was completely buried in most areas, requiring extensive digging to reach even minimal forage. The herd faced the winter's most significant challenge yet, finding sufficient food beneath the snow blanket. Thunder led them to the areas where wind had scoured portions of the ridgelines clear, exposing patches of frozen grass. The herd spread out in these limited areas, each horse working to uncover what nutrition remained in the dormant vegetation. Echo proved surprisingly adept at this essential skill. His hooves efficient at clearing snow, his attention focused on maximizing energy return for effort expended. The aftermath of the blizzard brought another challenge. Predators made desperate by the same harsh conditions affecting the Mustangs. Wolf tracks appeared in the snow near the herd's sheltering area, the pack having returned to the valley after finding slim pickings in their alternate hunting grounds. Their presence necessitated heightened vigilance, with Thunder organizing a rotation of sentry positions among the adult horses. Sierra found herself particularly alert to this renewed threat. Memories of her near-fatal encounter the previous year still vivid, despite the months that had passed. She positioned herself strategically when grazing, ensuring clear sightlines to Echo's location and potential escape routes should the wolves approach. Dawn seemed to sense her anxiety, the two mares often working in coordination to monitor different directions while Echo grazed between them. The wolves made their first testing approach on a moonlit night in late January. The herd detected them immediately, Thunder's warning snort alerting even the sleeping members to the danger. Sierra nudged Echo to his feet, positioning herself between him and the predator's scent. Dawn completed their protective formation as the main herd gathered in defensive posture. The wolf pack, led by the same alpha male who had nearly killed Sierra, circled at a distance, assessing potential vulnerabilities in the horse's defense. Finding none immediately apparent, they retreated into the darkness, unwilling to risk injury attacking alert. Healthy prey when their hunger had not yet reached desperate levels. This pattern repeated over subsequent nights. Cautious approaches by the wolves, immediate defensive reactions by the herd, followed by strategic withdrawal by the predators. It was an ancient dance of hunger and survival, each species acting according to evolutionary imperatives that balanced risk against necessity. Sierra noted with grim satisfaction that Echo showed appropriate fear of the wolves but not panic, a crucial distinction for survival in predator territory. He responded instantly to warning signals from older horses, positioned himself correctly during defensive formations, and remained alert without wasting precious energy on unnecessary flight. These were the lessons that would serve him throughout life, instinctive but honed through experience and observation. February arrived with marginally longer daylight but continuing cold. The herd had consumed most accessible forage in their immediate territory, necessitating more extensive movement to find adequate nutrition. Thunder led them in widening circles from their central sheltering area, traveling farther each day to reach grazing opportunities. This expanded range inevitably increased encounters with the wolf pack, whose own hunting territory overlapped the Mustang's winter range. The predators grew bolder as their hunger deepened, approaching closer during daylight hours, occasionally attempting to separate younger or weaker horses from the main group. The herd adapted by tightening their formation during travel, adult horses surrounding the yearlings, and positioning the strongest members at vulnerable points. Sierra found herself frequently at this defensive perimeter, her recovered strength and proven fighting ability making her a valuable protector. Dawn typically remained closer to Echo, her maternal behavior toward him now fully integrated into the herd's social structure. Between them, they ensured the young horse remained safe during these increasingly dangerous winter movements. It was during one such extended grazing expedition that the wolves made their most determined attack. The herd had traveled to a partially sheltered valley where wind patterns had created areas of thinner snow cover, exposing more vegetation than was available in their usual territory. The grazing was better, but the location was farther from familiar escape routes and defensive positions. The wolf pack approached from multiple directions, using terrain features for concealment until they were within striking distance. Thunder detected them first, his warning calls sending the herd into immediate defensive formation. Sierra found herself on the side facing the alpha male and his primary lieutenants, memory and instinct combining to heighten her aggressive response to this specific threat. Echo and the other yearlings gathered in the protected center of the formation, surrounded by adult horses presenting a barrier of dangerous hooves and teeth to the approaching predators. Dawn positioned herself at Echo's side, her own defensive posture complementing the larger herd response. The alpha wolf singled out Sierra almost immediately, recognition evident in his focused attention. Perhaps he remembered their previous encounter, the prey that had escaped death through unexpected intervention. Whatever his motivation, he directed his pack to concentrate pressure on the section where Sierra stood guard. 3 wolves approached simultaneously, attempting to create confusion and divided attention. Sierra held her ground, ears pinned flat, teeth bared in warning. When the first wolf darted in toward her legs, she struck with precision born of experience, her hoof connecting with enough force to send the predator tumbling backward with a yelp of pain. The other wolves hesitated, reassessing the risk presented by this particular target. Sierra pressed her advantage, taking an aggressive step forward rather than maintaining purely defensive posture. The unexpected counterpressure caused further hesitation among the attackers, creating a crucial moment of disruption in their coordinated strategy. Thunder seized this opportunity, leading a charging movement from multiple herd members that forced the wolf pack to scatter momentarily. The alpha snarled in frustration, regrouping his forces at a safer distance while maintaining focus on the herd's vulnerable points. What followed was not a retreat but a standoff, predator and prey assessing each other across a snowy battlefield, each calculating risk against potential reward. The wolves were hungry but not starving, dangerous but not desperate. The horses were vulnerable but vigilant, potential prey but not easy targets. The impasse stretched into tense minutes, neither side willing to commit fully to attack or retreat. Sierra maintained her aggressive posture, drawing strength from the memory of her previous survival and recovery. Echo watched from the protected center, absorbing vital lessons about predator defense that no amount of play or practice could simulate. It was Thunder who finally broke the stalemate, leading a coordinated charge by the adult horses that definitively drove the wolf pack back into the surrounding forest. The predators retreated in good order, neither routed nor defeated but temporarily discouraged from further pursuit. The encounter had ended without injury to either side, a victory of sorts for the herd, who had successfully protected their vulnerable members while obtaining badly needed grazing. Sierra remained vigilant as the herd resumed feeding, her attention divided between Echo's safety and monitoring for the wolves' potential return. Dawn approached, touching noses briefly in a gesture that communicated shared understanding of the danger narrowly averted. Echo, released from the center of the defensive formation, moved to his mother's side with newfound appreciation for her protective capabilities. This successful defense marked a turning point in the winter season. The wolf pack, having tested the herd's vulnerabilities and found them well protected, turned their primary attention to other prey. The elk herds moving through lower elevations, smaller mammals more easily separated from their social groups, occasionally winter-weakened deer or moose struggling through deep snow. Wolves still appeared periodically near the Mustang herd, opportunistically watching for weakness or separation, but their concentrated hunting efforts focused elsewhere. This reduction in predatory pressure coincided with the first subtle signs of winter's eventual retreat. Marginally warmer daytime temperatures, slightly longer daylight hours, occasional patches where snow melt revealed bare ground. As February progressed toward March, the herd's existence remained challenging, but moved gradually from desperate survival toward cautious renewal. Echo and the other yearlings showed increasing strength and development, their bodies utilizing the nutrition now more regularly available to build muscle and bone for the spring growth spurt to come. Sierra watched her son with quiet pride as he navigated the complex transition from dependent foal to independent yearling. He still occasionally sought her protection during threatening situations and Dawn's companionship during quiet moments, but increasingly demonstrated self-reliance in basic survival tasks, finding food, avoiding danger, maintaining position within the herd structure. The winter had tested them all, individually and collectively, and found them equal to its harsh demands. Sierra had proven her recovery complete through successful predator defense. Dawn had solidified her place within their unusual family unit while regaining her broader social connections. Echo had survived both illness and wolf encounters, emerging stronger and more capable from each challenge. And somewhere beyond the herd's immediate awareness, Dust maintained his solitary existence, occasionally visible on distant ridges, a silent guardian whose intervention had helped save Echo during his mysterious illness. His continued presence represented something profound about Mustang social structures, the connections that transcended immediate family groups and extended to broader genetic lineage. As March arrived with warming winds and melting snow patches, the first green shoots appeared in protected valleys, harbingers of the seasonal renewal that would soon transform their world. Thunder began leading the herd gradually upward, following the retreating snow line toward the higher elevation, grazing that would sustain them through spring and summer. Sierra felt the changing season in her body, energy returning with longer daylight and increasing temperatures. Echo practically vibrated with renewed vitality, his winter-grown coat beginning to shed in patches that revealed sleeker summer hair beneath. Dawn, too, showed the effects of seasonal transition, her movements more fluid as frozen ground gave way to softer terrain. They were survivors of winter's brutal testing, of predator encounters, of separation and illness and reunion. As the Wyoming wilderness awakened around them, so too did hope for the season ahead, for green grass and flowing water, for warm sun and gentle breezes, for the ancient rhythms of wild horse existence that had persisted through countless generations before them. The family they had formed, biological mother, surrogate guardian, and resilient offspring, moved together into spring's promise, strengthened by winter's adversity and bound by experiences that transcended conventional herd dynamics. Whatever challenges the new season might bring, they would face them with the resilience that had brought them through darkness into light. And on a distant ridge, silhouetted against the evening sky, Dust watched their progress before turning toward his own solitary path, separate but never entirely apart from the bloodline he had helped preserve through timely intervention. The aging bachelor stallion carried his own scars and wisdom, his own place in the complex web of wild horse society that humans could observe but never fully comprehend. The circle remained unbroken, life continuing through challenge and adaptation, through individual courage and collective wisdom, through the endless dance of seasons that had shaped Mustang existence since their return to the land that had first forged their kind. Spring arrived in full glory across the Wyoming wilderness, transforming the landscape with vibrant life. Meadows that had lain dormant under winter's grip now exploded with wildflowers, lupine and paintbrush, shooting stars and wild iris, creating a tapestry of color against emerald grass. Creeks swollen with snowmelt rushed through valleys, their clear waters teeming with renewed activity. Trees and shrubs unfurled fresh leaves, providing both food and shelter for the wilderness inhabitants emerging from winter's austerity. For Sierra and the Mustang herd, this seasonal abundance brought welcome relief after months of scarcity. They had returned to their traditional spring territory, high meadows and sheltered valleys, where generations of wild horses had grazed during this season of renewal. Echo, now a strong yearling, flourished in this environment of plenty, his body rapidly developing the muscular definition that would eventually transform him from gangly youth to powerful adult. Sierra observed her son's growth with the complex emotions of a mother witnessing her offspring's increasing independence. Echo still maintained close bonds with both her and Dawn, but spent more time with the other yearlings, engaging in play fighting and exploratory adventures that sometimes took them to the periphery of the herd's immediate awareness. These activities were crucial developmental stages, preparing young horses for the challenges of adult life through practice and social learning. Dawn had remained a constant presence in their unusual family unit, her bond with Echo undiminished despite his growing self-reliance. The arrangement that had begun as emergency intervention during Sierra's absence had evolved into something permanent and mutually beneficial, a chosen family structure that enriched all three horses' lives in ways that transcended conventional herd dynamics. Thunder continued his steadfast leadership, guiding the herd through seasonal transitions with the wisdom accumulated through years of dominance. His coat gleamed with renewed luster in the spring sunshine, his powerful movements displaying the confidence of a stallion in his prime. Yet Sierra occasionally noticed subtle signs of aging, a slight stiffness after rest, marginally slower reactions to sudden stimuli, the first silver hairs appearing around his muzzle. One crisp morning, as Sierra grazed alongside Dawn in a flower-dotted meadow, Echo playing with two other yearlings nearby, a distinctive sound reached them from the ridge above, the challenging trumpet of a stallion, not Thunder's familiar call, but something new yet oddly familiar. All heads lifted in unison, attention focused on the ridgeline, where a powerful figure stood silhouetted against the blue sky. The stallion was young, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, his bay coat catching the morning light with coppery brilliance. He pawed the ground, tossing his head in unmistakable challenge as his call echoed across the valley once more. Thunder responded immediately, moving from his grazing position to face the newcomer directly. The herd shifted nervously, sensing the significance of this confrontation. Sierra moved closer to Echo, maternal instinct driving her to protect him from potential chaos should a serious fight develop. The challenging stallion descended the ridge with confident strides, approaching to within 50 yards of Thunder before stopping to assess his opponent more carefully. There was something in his movement, in the set of his head and the line of his back, that struck Sierra as hauntingly familiar. When he turned briefly to maintain visual contact with the main herd, recognition dawned with stunning clarity. This was no random bachelor stallion seeking to establish his first harem. This was Ember, Dawn's lost foal, born 3 seasons earlier, presumed killed by mountain lions during his first winter. The distinctive white blaze on his forehead, the unique pattern of his movement, the particular arch of his neck when alert, all confirmed his identity beyond reasonable doubt. Dawn recognized him in the same moment, her body going rigid with shock. The mare took several steps forward, stopped, then moved forward again, torn between approaching her long-lost offspring and maintaining her position with Sierra and Echo. The complexity of emotion visible in her posture transcended simple animal reaction. This was profound recognition, joy mingled with disbelief, maternal connection unsevered by years of separation. Sierra remained beside Echo, who watched the unfolding drama with fascinated attention. The yearling seemed to sense the significance of this moment without understanding its specific nature, his normal playfulness replaced by focused observation. Thunder and Ember circled each other warily, each assessing the other's strength and determination. Despite his youth, Ember displayed remarkable confidence, his body language communicating serious intent rather than mere testing behavior. Thunder, for all his experience and dominance, showed appropriate caution when confronting this powerful young challenger. What followed was not the explosive battle many herd confrontations become, but something more measured, a series of feints and displays, brief moments of physical engagement followed by strategic withdrawal. It was almost ceremonial, as if both stallions recognized something important about their encounter that transcended typical dominance contests. After several minutes of this ritual confrontation, Thunder did something unprecedented in Sierra's experience. He stopped circling, lowered his head slightly and stepped aside, not in submission or defeat, but in what appeared to be deliberate choice. The gesture clearly surprised Ember, who paused in his aggressive posturing, head tilted in evident confusion. Thunder moved slowly toward the main herd, positioning himself not at center as was his long-established right, but at the periphery. The message, incomprehensible in human terms, but crystal clear in equine communication, appeared to be transition rather than defeat, a passing of leadership not forced through violence, but offered through wisdom. The herd remained frozen in collective uncertainty, traditional hierarchies suddenly disrupted by this unexpected development. Sierra found herself holding position beside Echo, watching as Dawn finally approached her returned son with cautious steps. The reunion between mare and offspring was subdued by human standards but profound in Mustang terms. A touching of noses, a shared breath, recognition across time and separation that defied simple understanding. Ember accepted his mother's greeting, then turned his attention to the herd he had apparently come to claim. His gaze swept across the assembled horses, assessing and cataloging in the way of new leaders. When his eyes reached Sierra and Echo, he paused, his attention focusing with particular intensity on the yearling who represented the herd's future. Sierra instinctively positioned herself more protectively in front of Echo, uncertain of this new stallion's intentions despite his connection to Dawn. Ember seemed to recognize her caution, maintaining distance while continuing his assessment. There was intelligence in his gaze that reminded Sierra powerfully of another horse. Not Dawn, but Dust, the aging bachelor who had saved her life and later helped heal Echo. Understanding bloomed in Sierra's awareness. The timing, the physical characteristics, the particular quality of movement and assessment. Ember was Dust's offspring as well as Dawn's. The stallion who had twice intervened to save Sierra and Echo was not merely a benevolent stranger, but family in the most meaningful sense. This realization spread a strange calm through Sierra's consciousness. The circle was completing itself in ways more perfect than any human narrative could arrange. Dawn's lost foal, sired by Dust before Thunder's challenge drove him from leadership, had survived against all odds and returned to claim his heritage. The herd was not changing hands to a stranger, but to blood connection, to continuation rather than disruption. Thunder seemed to understand this as well, his uncharacteristic behavior suddenly comprehensible in light of deeper recognition. The aging stallion had not surrendered leadership to random challenge, but acknowledged the rightful progression of bloodlines. His position at the herd's periphery now appeared less like demotion and more like elder statesman. Experienced protection still available without the burden of primary leadership. The herd gradually relaxed as this new reality established itself without the violence and chaos that often accompanied leadership transitions. Ember moved cautiously among them, making contact with key mares, establishing boundaries with younger stallions who remained with the family group, creating the foundations of his new role. Dawn approached Sierra and Echo, her movements communicating complex emotions beyond simple equine behavior patterns. There was joy in her reunion with her lost son, satisfaction in his evident survival and strength, but also clear commitment to the family unit she had formed with Sierra and Echo. She positioned herself beside them, creating a visual statement about her chosen affiliations, even as her biological offspring assumed leadership. Echo watched these developments with the focused attention that characterized his approach to new experiences. Sierra could almost see him processing the complex social dynamics unfolding around him, filing away lessons about leadership, transition, and the sometimes unexpected connections that shaped herd existence. As the day progressed into afternoon, a final participant appeared in this remarkable transition. Dust materialized on the same ridge where Ember had first announced his challenge, the aging bachelor's silhouette distinctive against the cloud-scattered sky. He made no move to approach directly, maintaining his characteristic distance from the main herd, but his presence added unmistakable significance to the day's events. Ember noticed his sire almost immediately, his head lifting in evident recognition. The young stallion left his newly acquired herd temporarily, trotting up the slope toward the solitary figure on the ridge. Their meeting was briefly obscured by distance, but when they reappeared, they moved in parallel along the ridgeline. Not together in the conventional sense, but clearly in communication of some kind. Sierra watched this interaction with profound appreciation for its significance. 3 generations were visible in that moment. Dust, the aging former leader, Ember, the emerging dominant stallion, and Echo, the yearling with potential yet to be fully expressed. Past, present, and future aligned in living form against the eternal Wyoming landscape that had shaped them all. After their ridgeline conference, Dust and Ember descended to the valley floor from different approaches. Dust maintained his customary distance from the main herd, settling on a knoll with good visibility but clear separation. Ember returned to his new leadership position, moving with increased confidence and purpose after the interaction with his sire. What came next surprised even Sierra, despite her years of observing Mustang social complexity. Ember approached Echo directly, his manner neither threatening nor dismissive, but evaluative, one male assessing another across the generation gap that separated established leader from potential future challenger. Echo stood his ground with remarkable composure for a yearling, neither retreating in submission nor displaying inappropriate aggression. Sierra remained close, prepared to intervene if necessary, but the interaction remained peaceful. Ember seemed to be acknowledging Echo in some significant way, perhaps recognizing their shared bloodline through Dawn's surrogate relationship. After a moment's direct contact, the new herd stallion moved away, having established some communication whose meaning was clear to the horses, if not to any human observer. By evening, the herd had settled into its new configuration with the adaptability that characterized wild horses' approach to change. Ember had assumed central leadership position, Thunder had transitioned to respected elder status, and the complex connections between various members had adjusted to accommodate these shifts without disrupting essential protective structures. Sierra found herself unexpectedly comfortable with the new arrangement. Ember's leadership style appeared to blend the best qualities of both his biological parents, Dawn's intelligence and Dust's strategic thinking, while adding his own youth and vigor. His treatment of Echo suggested appropriate mentorship rather than future rivalry, an investment in the herd's continuing strength through successive generations. As twilight softened the landscape, Sierra gazed across the valley where her remarkable journey had unfolded, from near death at the wolf's teeth to healing under human hands, from joyful reunion with Echo to this unexpected leadership transition that somehow felt like completion rather than disruption. Dawn grazed nearby, occasionally glancing toward her biological son, now leading the herd while maintaining her chosen position with Sierra and Echo. The complex relationships between them all defied simple categorization: biology and choice, inheritance and adaptation, past and future intertwining in living demonstration of Mustang society's subtle sophistication. Echo settled against Sierra's side as darkness claimed the valley, his growing body still seeking the comfort of maternal proximity despite his increasing independence. Above them, stars emerged in familiar patterns that had witnessed countless generations of wild horses moving through this landscape, the eternal backdrop against which their individual stories played out. From his solitary position nearby, Dust maintained silent vigil over the herd now led by his offspring, the aging guardian whose interventions had preserved bloodlines and possibilities beyond his own direct leadership. His presence completed the circle that had begun with Sierra's desperate flight from wolves, encompassing Echo's birth and growth, Dawn's grief and renewal, and now Ember's return and ascension. Sierra drifted toward sleep with newfound peace, sensing completion in this arrangement that transcended her understanding, yet satisfied some deep recognition of rightness. Her journey from wounded, desperate mother to established herd member with a thriving yearling son had come full circle. Whatever the future held, whatever challenges the wilderness might present, whatever transitions age might eventually require, this moment contained a perfection that justified all previous struggle. As night fully claimed the Wyoming wilderness, the Mustangs rested in their new configuration, Ember alert at the herd's protective perimeter, Thunder in his elder statesman position, Dawn and Sierra and Echo in their chosen family unit, and Dust maintaining solitary yet connected presence nearby. Together, they embodied the resilience that had allowed their kind to survive across centuries of challenge and change, finding renewal in each generation's adaptation to the eternal cycles of wild existence. The stars turned overhead, indifferent yet witnessing. The mountains stood silent sentinel as they had for millennia. The wind carried scents of sage and wildflowers across the valley, connecting all living things in the shared breath of wilderness. And in this perfect moment of balance between past and future, the wild horses slept beneath the ancient Wyoming sky, free, connected, and ultimately unbroken.